He was all rutted up for sure.
There was going to be a doe that shot out like 45 yards.
Scary movie up against the ceiling.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Deer Grow.
Heck yeah, man. Dude, we put a lot of food in the ground every year, seemingly more and more, and we have a ton of fun with it during the off season. There's some struggles that come with it too, though, right? Obviously, the back of my truck is evidence, right now. It's a couple weeks after I jackknifed, a 4,800-pound material spreader, as I was coming down, and it was too much weight for my truck there. But, all those struggles aside, Deer Grow really has been a staple for our food plotting process for several years now. Yes, we like to put lime and fertilizer on the plots, if we can, but there are some that it's just we're not able to get to them, or it's not feasible for us to get out of state with that stuff. And so Deer Grow is kind of the quick and easy, but still super effective option for us to be able to get the most out of those food plots that we can every year.
Yeah, and we're guilty of overanalyzing things just like everyone else, but that's the best part about Deer Grow is that it's going to create healthier soils, which in turn makes better food plots. And the fact is we can simply spray plot start or plot till when we put the seed in the ground, and then when that plant starts to grow, we hit it with boost. And we know that we walk away, when we come back, it's going to be a great looking food plot. For anybody that's looking to try Deer Grow, if you use the code HUNTR15, that's HUNTR15 at checkout for deergrow.com, you're going to save 15% on any of your Deer Grow products. It's a great way to get started on this and just see what the results are for yourself.
Better food plots, bigger deer.
And we're back.
Heyo.
HUNTR Podcast, episode 157, as Nick keeps us in line.
Before we start here, appreciate you guys listening wherever you're at, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts at. Do us a favor, subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and leave us a comment somewhere. We do see those. Jeremy and I try to be intentional about scrolling through those from time to time. So appreciate you guys listening, and continue to follow us.
It's what I like to refer to as National Bill Winky Day, November 7th.
Is it November 7th?
It is his favorite day of the year.
I forgot to put my watch on today. I just realized.
November 7th.
The fans will notice tonight that we kept saying that it was going to drop on November 6th, the Drury episode.
Ooh.
So they're going to be like,
November
what's going
7th.
on?
Yeah. Once it gets to the rut, our minds kind of drift a
Who's
bit.
keeping track of days?
Yeah.
I don't even know what day today is.
The
Monday?
You know what?
Tuesday? Today's Tuesday.
Yeah,
It is
today's Tuesday.
Yeah,
We're
happy Tuesday.
We're filming early.
We're having
this
tacos a week ago. Taco Tuesday.
We were doing live podcast a week ago. Question mark?
Wednesday. Because we had...
that was Halloween.
No.
That was Tuesday.
Yeah, you're right, because I was burning up after the tacos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Halloween.
Yeah.
So Halloween, the live podcast was a week ago. If you're listening to this, it was several weeks ago. But yeah, it's November 7th, National Bill Winky Day, which I watched his update the other day. Bill's not having a great season.
Isn't he?
Just not many bucks. The ones that he does have is nocturnal and or not showing.
Have they killed any off that farm yet? Has Jordan killed one? I know she was after that 4-year-old, pretty solid 4-year-old.
I don't know if she
he's
killed
got
it or
two,
Yeah.
whatever, older.
I don't know if she
age
killed that or not. I don't think so. Not that I know of, at least.
I mean, it seems like a tough farm to hunt. Do you know how big it is?
Well, it's a topography. I know that.
Yeah, huge. Well, the challenge, it seems like, is we kind of deal with it in Ohio, is like these bucks are bedded on these big timber ridges, and they're just looking down into bottoms.
Yeah, they see you.
And the primary axis is up the gut of the farm. Those are tough to hunt.
Yeah, they see you. Yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what he's gotten into besides that update. And, I know Ethan was on a pretty good buck on one of the permission farms out there. So I know Ethan's a big podcast listener for HUNTR. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if Bill gives him enough time to listen to it now, but
yeah, I'm sure
typically
he gets
is.
it in. Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's National Bill Winky Day, November 7th.
I like that.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, it's what, Nick? Probably the 20-something?
21st, I believe.
21st, yep. So almost Turkey Day. Yeah, I love some turkey.
I'm just looking forward to a plate full of like everything.
Just everything. Yeah, hammered down.
Big stuffing guy.
Oh yeah,
who
me
isn't,
too.
dude?
It's the best.
Absolutely.
It's the best.
Yeah, just got to balance it though, because you eat too much stuffing and you're full.
Yeah.
That's hard to compact.
Yeah.
The shit's already compacted.
Or
Make time to eat again later.
cranberry sauce,
I like it all, dude.
green bean casserole.
All of it.
Oh my god.
Ugh.
I don't think there's a single thing on the Thanksgiving menu that I'm not a huge fan of.
Yeah.
The only thing I've learned to pass as I get older is the dinner rolls, because that shit fills you up way too quick, and it takes away from the other space.
Kind of like the wasted pasture acreage of a primo
Very
farm.
much so.
Yeah, you want to keep it a good stuff.
That's pure fescue in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I try to.
We want some more in the clover, more in the
because they're
CRP.
always available. They're right there staring at you, and you're like, oh, I should throw one of these on top. And then once it's on top, it's like easy to reach, easy to. Is
that my laptop?
Access.
Yeah.
That's weird. I've never heard it make that noise before.
Beep, beep, beep.
Someone's trying to get into your Google account. Might be Margie.
Really?
I don't know. It said enter your password for Jared Prussia in internet accounts.
It also could be ISIS.
It could be.
I didn't get anything.
Well, we've had a busy last week, and we've got a busy 2 weeks ahead of us, as do most people listening to this. I mean, it's November.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to believe, I know, just because we always screw this up, or at least I do. So this past weekend, which would have been, 4th, 5th, something around there, Minnesota gun season open. So there's a rifle season. Yeah,
Minnesota has a gun season in the first week of November and just opened up the crossbow season?
You are
Holy
correct.
cow.
Yeah, that hurts feeling it.
That hurts.
That hurts feeling it at this point.
Sorry for you guys.
I know that this upcoming weekend.
No wonder we see more Minnesota plates out of state than anywhere else.
I know.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because their gun season's done.
Yeah.
So then they go hunt elsewhere. Kentucky opens this Saturday.
Wow.
Missouri opens this Saturday. Wisconsin, I believe, opens this Saturday.
I think the youth season in Ohio opens up too. This coming
2 weeks.
weekend, 2 weekends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 17th and 19th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Wisconsin's the one I always mess up, so somebody's going to correct this. I can't remember if it is this weekend or if it's the next weekend. It's either this upcoming one, which is the 10th, I think, or the 17th or 18th. Something like that. So, yeah, lots of gun
Missouri's
seasons
opening, right?
Yeah, Missouri and Kentucky for sure open up this Saturday.
Yeah, because we're always driving through that Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of sucks.
Wow,
The best looking day of our week here is when we're going to be rendezvousing. Saturday morning.
So first of all, let's kind of recap. We talked about a little bit with Yoder on the last podcast, but so this is just Jared and I, and everybody's gone. So just us on the podcast. Let's talk a little bit about like the last week, and then we'll kind of lean into the week ahead. So I guess as we kind of said this a week ago, Jared and I were at our Illinois farm for the first time hunting. So we did the live podcast and stuff, and expectations were we had a handful or 3 or 4 mature 8 points that we were basically targeting. We have not seen, and it's not that I don't think they exist, we have not seen any giants, transparently.
At the Illinois farm?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it's relative. But
yeah.
We've seen some big
some
old studs,
Yeah.
But nothing probably scoring over.
I guess when I say giants, I mean score giants. Like, we've not seen any booners.
Yeah, no booners.
We have some really great young bucks that score high.
Yeah, solid. Good 3 and 4 year olds.
Mm-hmm.
But because of like the 8, so it's kind of a rolling. Like we're making decisions on as we kind of go here.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we've got enough older age class bucks, 5 or older, that it seems like we're able to. Those are worth targeting. So hey, let's
absolutely.
And so we're making a conscious decision, I think, to try and pass on some of these 4-year-olds. Just I think it should come down to that too. I mean, I'm kind of comparing that to our home farm, and I'm like, man, it's just kind of a, the goals are relatively the same.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, man, I want to get these bucks to 5 years old, but
what's the realistic expectation?
Yeah, in Ohio, it's just it's the chances are so much less, and but when we look at our Illinois farm, it's like, dude, we probably have at least 4 or 5 5-year-old or older bucks on 140 acres.
Yeah, which is crazy.
So it's like, well, no brainer. You know what I mean? Let's pass these 3 and 4 year olds, and almost seems like we have more of those older mature bucks even than we do the 3 and 4 year olds. I assume because they're just kicking their butts. And,
pushing them off. Yeah, and I think that it's all relative to the space, right? Because how that landscape is super fragmented out there. And keep in mind, like, I don't think all these mature bucks are bedding at all times on our property, right? They're off and on, but they're close enough that we see them almost daily, every other day.
Mm-hmm.
So, it definitely, it's one of those things that, as we kind of talk about November and even, later part of October, it's people's expectations, need to be in check with where they're hunting. Case in point, if you're hunting public land in Pennsylvania, I don't think many people are passing 3-year-olds, which I don't think I would pass a 3-year-old.
Probably not.
And it's not because I don't want to kill a 4 or 5-year-old. That's my goal every year. But it's just the reality is there aren't many of them, if any of them, in most areas. Whereas out there, there are a lot of mature bucks. Same with Kansas. We're going to be talking about Kansas here soon. Like, there's a lot of mature bucks in Kansas. The one thing I think will be interesting as we kind of get more history in that part of Illinois and even what we've seen in other places is, we've mentioned it before, and I know it's not relative to everybody, but the high grading thing is an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Because we've seen, we've got a 4-year-old that's probably 160s on that Illinois farm. We've got a 3-year-old that's probably mid-50s on that Illinois farm. I think there's a lot of guys that would shoot those deer, and I don't blame them.
Sure.
If it's just I'm out hunting and I'm looking for a big buck. But the more you start to shoot those deer, the more you see kind of what we're seeing, and it's no disrespect to the deer, but we're seeing a lot of 5- and 6-year-old bucks that are under 140, but just 300-pound deer, including the deer I shot. It's like, and I don't know if you look at like a bell curve for like antler score and quality, most deer are going to be 8 points and under 140 inches. That's the top of the bell curve. That varies probably by soil type and management and everything. But, the average buck will have 8 points and he'll probably be under 140 inches at maturity. That's pretty much anywhere. So then as you start to look at that, you're going to have deer that are worse than that. And you're going to have just as many deer that are worse than that as you are better than that, which is a hard thing for, I think, a lot of people to fathom.
Meaning better scoring or worse scoring, same age.
And equal numbers of them. So you'll have...
That's got to vary state to state, right? In terms of...
I don't know. I don't think it does. I mean, most deer are 8 points under 140 inches at maturity.
Yeah, because there's probably the two main factors would be, age. Well, no. If we're taking age out of it, it comes down to
nutrition
genetics and nutrition.
And genetics are about the same. Small variations across the board.
Yeah.
And that goes back case in point that you're not going to manage a free-ranging herd for genetics. Like, you're not going to shoot out all the 8 points and hope all the 10 points make it. It's impossible.
Sure.
Can't do it.
Yeah.
People can argue that. You can't do it.
Well, at a mass scale, I mean, that is the high grading conversation,
Yeah.
So it is happening, but it's because you have, a majority of hunters kind of...
Or antler restrictions in place that are forcing...
Or antler restrictions.
The harvest onto deer that are better quality and leaving lesser quality.
I suppose it's not, it's what we should expect when the highest value that a deer has is its antlers, right? It's
absolutely.
To most people are like, I want to... with varying degrees of willingness to pass or, whatever. But most guys want to shoot a big antler deer. And so...
let's say when most people say, I saw a big buck, they're not talking about the body.
Right.
Even though, like,
right.
in a lot of cases, like, we have those conversations. If you say you saw a big buck, the first thing you look at is the antlers. It's undeniable.
It's kind of the natural selection of that situation where guys are valuing antler size over age, and I don't blame them. I mean, that's antlers are awesome.
Yeah,
we want the biggest ones there. So I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just we're kind of experienced. I think what I mean. And
it's funny on a like, I don't know what you would call it, science level or evolution level. Like, there's been a lot of research around what are the qualities of a deer that essentially establish the hierarchy for breeding. Which is very relevant to the time frame we're in now. A lot of people would say, well, it's the most mature buck, the biggest body buck, the brute buck. But there's a lot of thoughts of like, do does select bucks based on antler size?
Well, check this out.
Does size matter, Nick? That's the age-old question.
Check this out. So Dad has seen 2 different bucks, maybe more than, I'll say 2 different does get bred by bucks in the past week or so. One was just a mature buck. I do think he's at least 5 and a doe just out in the middle of a field. The other one there was 2 or 3 bucks, and he saw at least 2 of them breed this doe. One was, he's thinking it was that V-brow buck probably.
Oh, yeah.
Probably a 4-year-old. But also saw a 2-year-old breeder, and they were like
they're all right there,
and they were all right there. So it was just kind of like a.
I don't know what the exact numbers are. Yeah, soup kitchen. The I think Mississippi State did the research, but it's kind of an alarmingly high number of does that have a fawn from one buck and another fawn from another buck, called multiple paternity.
Is it it's alarming,
like
or it's just surprising?
30+%.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Is that surprising, or is that just? I mean,
I think by the nature of how,
maybe in the sense that people didn't know that could happen.
Correct. Yeah. But I think by nature of like how deer are herd species, and to that case in point, when a doe comes into estrus, it's usually not just one buck around her, right? There's multiple.
Can
bucks
other species do that? I assume so, right?
Yeah.
People can't do that, right?
I don't know. I don't think.
I
so.
assume. Most. What's the term for like hooved animals?
Ungulates.
Most ungulates probably, if deer can do it, I assume mule deer and elk and stuff can do it.
Well, what's interesting about like elk at least is most elk only have one calf, right? So like the average is one calf per cow, whereas in whitetails obviously it's 1.5 to 2. Yeah, that's the average. Your younger does are usually only having one fawn. Your older does are having 2 fawns to a point.
Pretty wild.
So yeah, I mean, because that's when we talk about stick around the what bucks can be at maturity and stuff. When we talk about the genetic side, right? In most of those cases, that doe has contributed genetics to both fawns, whereas that buck may have only contributed genetics to one fawn, and then this buck committed genetics to the other. So it's where a lot of people talk about like the rule of does being like the dictator essentially of genetic quality, is because at any given time when the doe has the fawns, right, those fawns have her genetics, period. But it depends on the fawn maybe having this buck's genetics, like that 2-year-old genetic. And it's not saying that buck didn't have good genetics. He was a 2-year-old, could be a stud at 4 or 5.
Sure.
So that's the hard part, because people are like, oh, what if the spike breeds a doe? Well, if that spike's 1 year old, he could be a booner at 5.
I know.
You don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So I
always get a kick out of the genetics. Like the way we perceive them is like guys will, just say anything that you believe, It's like when guys say, oh, I'm glad this deer got a chance to breed before I killed him. And it's like, this deer been breeding for 4 years. Like, he's been breeding since he was 1.5 years old.
Yes.
I mean, yes. Yeah. I guess you got another season under your belt there, I guess, but.
Yeah, it's a weird conversation.
Dude, it is cool. It's really neat to see and try to make connections, like lineages on farms that you hunt. Like, that big 3-year-old we've got this year, the dad pass. It's like, he's like a spitting image of Goose.
Yeah.
And it's the first deer that I've had. I mean, so Goose was 7 years ago. It's like 7 years ago. When he was 3, 4, 5 years old is when he got killed. It just looks exactly like him.
Isn't that wild?
Exactly, and he's right in the same area too. And I'm like, man, it'd be cool to kind of,
I'm sure,
watch him progress. And I see tastes of like the Spaniard. I'm like, in those little pockets. I'm like, ooh, I'm like that deer kind of has. Just
what's the one thing that we talk about on your farm all the time? Say Prussia browse.
The Prussia browse.
The Prussia browse.
And that's not a distinct lineage. That's a lot of our deer. Have a lot of your deer have
just big brows on them, and it's kind of, or multiple brows, and it's just kind of weird because you don't see that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that buck that Harlan shot this year behind the house as a 2-year-old looks exactly like the larger buck that I've been hunting behind the house. Like great G2s, like almost non-existent 3s. Yeah. And so it's just, I'm sure that deer's an offspring. What down the line, whether it was him directly or a doe from him, like, those are the mix and matches that you don't know, but you for sure see traits. I mean, people ask me that all the time. When I was doing management, one of the first things people would ask is like, well, how can I tell a farm is good before I buy it? In retrospect to the deer aspect, not necessarily like habitat and layout. And it's like, well, I mean, that's why history is so important, And the first thing that I look at is age, because if that property doesn't have a history of producing 4 and or 5-year-old bucks, if that's your goal, you're going to have a tough time, right? And that may not be indicative of the property. It's just the neighborhood that you're in. And then from there, I do look I look at bucks with more points than 8. And it's a weird indicator, but I don't care if they're a 2-year-old, right?
Yeah,
if I see 9 and 10s or in some cases 12s in a history of that, That's a good sign on that property from a gene standpoint.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you can manage to only have those. There's plenty of 8s in the groups with them. But there's a lot of farms that I've seen that don't have anything bigger than an 8 point. No more points than an 8, ever.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say ours is at risk of, all of our 5-year-olds are 8 points, 5 or older, right? You got flop, you got G4, you got the sticker. And the only one that's not is that crazy thing.
Crazy horse.
And he's a 10 point, he's got 5 on one side, and that's a great name. Crazy horse.
Is it?
That's what we're naming him. I like that. Crazy horse.
Yeah. And he's got, just like he's got a pedicle injury.
And then look at our
side.
younger deer, granted, not as many of them. That's what I was saying earlier. Like we have a bunch of those 5-year-olds that we're targeting, and you already took one out, 128-inch 8 point, 5-year-old probably. And on the younger side, you've got McJagger, who's your 160 type 4-year-old split G2 10 point.
For 10.
And you've got whatever, that 3-year-old that we haven't named, solid 150s, 10 point 3-year-old.
That other 4-year-old that broke his G2 that I thought was the same.
That's right. Dagger or whatever we'll call him.
We've got several.
That 2-year-old 10 point. Yeah, like most, 4 and younger seems to have better genetics than our 5 and up. And so that's why, not like that we're targeting those older 8 point. I mean, we're going to try to clean that up.
Well, what we don't want to see is those younger, high quality bucks get pushed out and killed. Yeah. And I mean, it, for all the obvious reasons, is we want to see them get another year on them. We want them to be on that property. We want to be the thing is it doesn't matter what the property size is that if you can be the most influential on that deer as possible, you stand the best chance of either protecting and or shooting that deer. They're going to go off the property lines, whether it's 28 acres or 150 acres or 500 acres. But the more influential you can be, the more that deer is going to stick, especially during daylight hours, to the property. Because we've talked about that with Sturgis in the past, is like, you could have giant bucks that are on your property at all times during the night, that you are not the most influential on that deer. Because it's all at night, you can't do anything. Like, you're not going to be able to harvest that deer. You're not going to be able to protect that deer, right? If he's only coming on your property in the evenings, that's just how it is.
I mean, in that case, break it down, you're saying to influence a herd it's done by killing one of the animals.
Or protecting
them. And so, the way that you have control over that is like where they're killable or, AKA moving in daylight hours.
Yeah, and it's funny because I talk to people, I've had this conversation just over the last couple of weeks with people who are purely hunting public land. It's the same thing. It's like, listen, on public land, there are places on public land that these deer are moving during daylight hours. Those are the influential spots on public land. There's a lot of public land and even adjacent private land that these deer are moving nocturnal. Forget about it. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the conversation. And that's where, like, when you start to talk about, like, even my Ohio farm where I've got all this public bordering me, I've got a lot of deer on camera at night on the public land. But those deer are daylighting on my farm, right? Or vice versa. I've got deer that are daylighting on public and nighttime on my farm. Like, there are influential spots across the landscape. And I think if you can identify those spots, that's where you have the best chance of success. And it's all the standard things. It's like, where's he bedding, right? If you can locate where he's bedding, the odds of you seeing him in daylight are substantially increased. And it doesn't, we've broken down our Illinois farm here in the last week just with what we're seeing on trail camera and observations. And it's like, as much as it seems crazy, it's like, damn, these deer are probably bedded right next to the road.
Yeah.
And once you identify that, now you can set up stand locations that are influential to that location. Because if you catch them at night, like, it doesn't matter. You got Grady's on your farm, he's there at night, but that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, well, you're just saying, like, the good spots on the farm. Yeah, like, you're in what you're calling an influencer spot is just the spot you're likely to kill them or not have an opportunity to see in daylight. Yeah. I mean, for sure. And different properties, I think, have different qualities, but there is no way to have 100% control of that without, I mean, frankly, high fences that's the only way.
Yeah, you can't.
That you've got total influential power over your herd. These, man, you can have even so, Sturgis is the guy that I guess coined. He's not the first to do it, but he coined the term, herd influencer, which just means how do you have the most opportunities? How do you have the most daylight movement happening in a space that you can have an effect on, on your farm, basically. And even he's got deer that like he's like, I don't know, they just don't like us. They leave.
Yep. Yeah,
because they do.
I've got plenty of deer that I see often on camera all at night, and I don't know if I'll ever see that deer in daylight.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's like home is home. I think to these deer, and so you can give them everything they want, but if they have a certain connection to a certain area, or like have survived for so long in a certain space, like not on your farm, you're not going to necessarily coax them over and be like, oh, I'm gonna move. That's a big decision.
Well, that's
for us, right? I'm gonna pick up my home area and I'm gonna make it here from here on out. I mean, that's
the mystique of these big bucks, I think, and we've said about it jokingly to a point, but it's like, man, if you could collar and track some of these mature bucks, number one is like, even at this time of year, it's like, how early in like an evening, let's say, do these deer get up to move from their bed? And I assume it varies a lot by pressure. I think pressure is the number one factor. People talk about private public land and this and that. Listen, it ultimately doesn't matter what it is pressure. I think number one, even more so than weather, determines when these deer are going to move.
Pressure.
Human pressure.
Not barometric pressure.
No. I think human pressure dictates how these deer move way more than any other factor out there. Weather, moon phase, whatever the hell rut, doesn't matter. It's human pressure, especially when you get into those older age classes. But even in younger, that buck, if he is pressured, he is not getting up from his thick cover until he feels like it's time to get up from his thick cover. And if he's constantly faced with human pressure, unless you're talking about like suburban Columbus or something like that deer ain't moving. Well,
I mean, it's interesting on that Illinois farm. We didn't have a single picture of Frank. I don't think of any bucks in daylight until like November.
Yeah,
like late October.
I mean, I shot my buck in daylight before we had a daylight picture of a mature buck.
Yeah, I mean, they were just inherently, not fairly nocturnal, more than we'd seen.
We had only seen a couple mature deer on camera. Period.
Right.
It was really in the last week that it was like.
Right.
All of a sudden, they start popping.
Yeah, and that pocket there seems to be, extremely influenced by the crops,
the agricultural cover.
And I mean, as far as the GPS man, you could learn so much just to know to know what these deer are doing. It's funny. The other night, I hunted 2 days there in Ohio, and the second night was really slow. I sat in just a blind over a food plot, and I didn't see hardly anything. I mean, just a yearling buck and two fawns or whatever. And then I left, and when I was driving home, it's like an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, freaking deer everywhere. I think it would just be so eye-opening for people to see. It's like
they're there
under the cover of darkness.
Yeah,
these deer will go, especially during the rut. I mean, they're in your yard, they're crossing the roads. It's like it's like a totally different world, when darkness comes.
Yeah, I think it even when I hunted public land here in Pennsylvania a lot, and even in Missouri when I lived there, it was so weird because once I narrowed down where a buck was likely bedding, right? I never knew I wasn't the type of guy to go in and say, oh, this is a buck bed or not. I didn't find that. But once I kind of narrowed down, like, all right, this is where I think this deer is bedding, it was more calculated approach to, like, the conditions all had to align for me to see him during daylight hours. When you think about the advent of trail cameras and stuff, you're like, well, you kind of have eyes on that 24/7. I mean, look back through your buck pictures. Like, I would say 70% of them are night pictures. They're animals of habit where they're moving at, right before daylight and right after dusk.
There's a term for it.
Crepuscular.
Yeah. Dawn and dusk, peak movement times.
Yep. And so, when you start to look at that kind of thing, it really goes to kind of the Cody DeQuistio's mindset and, even Dan Enfalt, like, the more aggressive in a calculated way you can be, your success enhances, like, astronomically. Because if you consider sitting back and trying not to pressure these deer, you don't want to booger, whether it's your property or public, it doesn't matter. The fact is the more conservative you are, I bet your chances decrease pretty rapidly. Now, over the course of the season, you may have more sightings or that deer may stay on your property, but putting yourself in the position of success or harvest is probably dramatically lower being conservative. But you also can't be over the top aggressive to where you just kind of throw, all signs to the wind and just are like, oh, I'm just going to go in here and hunt because this is where he's at. Because ultimately that pressure could kill the hunt and possibly the deer, even more.
I mean, it should, I think it needs to change throughout the season. Like, I think earlier and later, you probably would do well to be more conservative because their patterns are not going to necessarily, be all like. I guess what I'm saying is like during when people are in the woods, like these deer are getting pressured no matter what you do.
Well, we've talked about it before. I mean,
the reality is every single property in America is getting hunted.
That's so weird, isn't
and
it?
Every single deer, almost probably every single deer is encountering hunters in the woods. And so yes, you don't want to tip them off to like being having a terrible experience in a specific area, and they smell you, they see you, and it's like okay, they might avoid that area. But these deer are they're smelling people in the woods everywhere. They're busting hunters. They're seeing people getting out. There's trucks driving through fields and stuff. Like they're getting pressured no matter what. And so at times of the season where maybe the pressure is not as direct, maybe not as harmful, I would argue early and late if you had food sources or you have bedding areas that you can kind of that they feel safe in for a period of time. But during the rut, I mean, these deer are covering so much ground. They're uncovering so much pressure. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think you have to get in there, be in the right time, right place. Here's the negative, I think, of being conservative during those peak movement times of the year is that like they know you were there whether you're there or not. They smell you walking in. They can sense that they know that you were there. So the problem is if let's say you have to go 100 yards to get to, I'm just using that as an example, like get into the, the spot, get it, you're calling it the influential spot but just the killing spot. If you stop short of that, if you go 50 or, 50, 60 yards, let's say, and you're like, I want to be conservative, I'm going to stay kind of on the buffer here. Let's say you don't see that deer and then you get out and leave, then that deer under the cover of darkness walks right in there and he knows you were just there.
Yeah,
and he it has the same impact as if you had gone in that 100 yards or whatever it is and killed him. Maybe you got an opportunity in daylight. So you have to weigh it like that. It's like the deer knows you were there whether you saw him or not. So you need to make your time in the woods as effective as possible.
How long do you think some of those deer are affected by, let's say, the discovery of you as a hunter? So
depends on the encounter.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Wind, sea.
Yeah, like I think if a deer, depends. Like, so, you bumped a deer going into the pinch the other day, and they didn't see you or smell you.
No.
To your knowledge.
Heard me.
They just heard you. And I think the deer will be back, that night.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think they were that affected by that situation. Winky's done a good job talking about that. He's just talking about different types of encounters. The contrary would be if you sneak into a buck's bedroom and, you see him coming out last light or whatever, and wind swirls and he smells you, and if, you're not in a good cover tree, if he sees you and he's at a close distance, maybe he's got close before he realizes you're there, that's going to freak him out. If he sees you, smells you, and he's close, and it's a close encounter, they don't like that. However, that's what I'm saying is like, during the rut, these deer, they'll do crazy stuff.
Sure.
You know what I mean? A doe could
they're not
pull them through there the
correctly.
same day.
Yeah.
The same is probably not true, late season, or, especially late season after they've encountered all this pressure. Let's paint the same scenario. You go into whatever, a tree stand or a blind on the edge of a food source. Same thing happens. They're going to probably be a lot more wary of coming back into that situation when their judgment's not clouded by does. They're not actively seeking. They're just trying to safely get between bed and food, and they know that you were there and they caught you. They're going to be careful around that situation in the future.
I mean, I've killed, I want to say it was the year after I killed that buck over your shoulder. I killed a 4-year-old up on the mountain who was with a doe locked down, and he busted me twice in the stand. Knew I was there.
Which one was this?
That was the one I killed up at Foster's place. Had like a rope beam.
Yeah.
Busted me twice. I filmed it. Yeah.
Yeah, like he knew you were there.
Knew I was there.
Looking at you,
but would not leave the doe.
Yeah.
And eventually that doe literally was under my stand or within a 10-yard radius the entire time, and he was doing circles around me, big loops, and eventually she came through and he couldn't help but follow her. and it killed him at 10 yards, and
Yeah.
that deer knew that was in there. In fact, the Illinois buck that I killed, I don't think he knew what I was or where I was. He just knew in that vicinity that something was there. He saw something that shouldn't have likely been there, but he hesitated enough that it killed him. Mm-hmm. So it's funny in that there's certain ones or certain time frames that I think you can get away with it. I think the one thing we've talked about in the past is the one thing we don't realize as hunters, because a lot of times we're hunting in woods or, the way that the landscape lays, is the number of bucks that wind us that we never see.
Oh, yeah.
That get downwind from us, and we're just like, I can't believe this buck didn't show. He was down there. Right. He smelled you. He's gone.
Well, dude, the difference between the deer's, their auditory versus sight versus smell, basically. Olfactory.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they trust their nose 10 times more than they trust their eyes.
Absolutely.
To the point where, regardless of the time of season, they might see you, and there's a chance that if you just kind of they're like a T-Rex. If you're just still, they just kind of, they'll give up on you.
The old T-Rex move.
Because if they can't smell you,
mm-hmm.
they won't be able to confirm it. Yes, you don't want them to see you.
Sure. That's why cover in a tree is so.
But that's why you can kill a deer in fluorescent orange.
Yeah, exactly.
They might see you, but they're just kind of like it's cool until they smell you, and now their suspicions are confirmed, and they're done.
Yes.
On the contrary, if they don't see you and they just smell you, they ain't waiting around. They're gone.
No. Yeah, and I mean that's where everybody knows it has been winded by buck and stuff, except for John Eberhard.
Right.
And yeah, and but the number of deer you don't see that wind you is astronomical. Yeah. Most of the time, it's those mature bucks that you're hunting. Like those mature does, they'll let you know they smelled you. Like it's a mile and a half away, and it's
yeah. Well, that's where it's cool to it's kind of an art, I think, of reading. What would you call that? The mannerisms. You know what I mean? Just,
oh yeah.
You can tell. You can tell when a deer goes on edge, and when if you spend enough time, in the woods, you can almost what they're thinking. Like
mm-hmm.
the minute they smell you, just their demeanor changes. They stiffen up a little bit, or
yep.
That is imperative, I think, to reading the situation, and actually. So when you talk about once a deer's in killing range or in bow range or whatever, then it becomes. So here we go. I'm trying to kill this thing. We're in the right spot. The deer's there in
mm-hmm.
daylight. Now you have this whole subset of this is where Ben Risen would be the guy to break down for you what happens in this moment here. I'm trying to control my breathing. I'm trying to not freak out and drop stuff. I'm trying to be aware of other eyes, and very much trying to read the demeanor of the deer that I'm trying to kill. I'm watching him watch other deer. I'm aware of where he's at in relation to my scent, my wind direction and stuff, and all of those are calculated decisions to when to draw, when to shoot. Do I have to stop him or not? What's happening around me?
I think a lot of people have a difficult time processing all that at the same time.
Oh, dude, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard. I mean, it's
hard to explain or teach somebody that too.
Yeah, well, that's what makes somebody a killer. You can put somebody in the right stand or in the right spot or whatever, but when that buck is there, especially a big buck, a big old mature buck, these things are not dumb. There's a lot of that's where experience, I think, comes in. It's okay. I've seen this before. I can anticipate what this deer's going to do, and all of those factor into the decisions that you make to, get the thing killed.
I think it's in that same right, a little bit earlier than this time, but this time as well is calling at bucks, especially when you have visual on them. I think a lot of people, immediately, if a buck's out of range, they're like, I'm going to ground him in, I'm going to rattle him in. I think understanding that buck's demeanor when you see him is going to give you a lot of insight into, is he going to respond to that, or is he going to spook by it, or is he going to lock up? Even where you're at in a stand, if he can see the whole bottom and you grunt or rattle at him and he looks and he's like, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
He's not coming.
Or even worse, the deer's directly downwind of you.
Yeah.
A lot of guys would probably still call at it. You know what I mean? But the reality is, he's gonna smell you.
He's got you.
He's got you.
He already has you. He's just like,
he might
I know
already
that I'm far enough away that it's not a danger.
And now, you're throwing sounds at him that he should associate with hey, I'm coming to that, or I'm intrigued by that too. Oh, that's weird. It's coming from the thing I know is not right.
Yeah.
And they learn from that.
Yep.
Almost for sure. You know what I mean? That's where you see higher pressured states, deer respond way less to calling. It absolutely is for that reason.
Yeah.
Guys calling at deer and getting busted.
I think it's, and I don't know if I inherently do it, but I've killed more bucks blind calling than I have calling at. And I think, obviously, if I can't see them, they can't necessarily see where my location is. And so that blind calling kind of has to draw them at least closer to investigate or to get downwind of me if they can. And if you set yourself up right, they shouldn't try to get downwind, right? Or you should be parallel to them at worst. But I do think that blind calling aspect of it is an interesting thing, because I know there's a lot of people. In fact, I think it was Terry Drury. I think Terry said something the other day where he doesn't blind call at all. He only calls when he sees a deer. And I know a lot of people that are like that.
Same way.
Is he?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have had way more success blind calling than I have. I've killed deer that I've called at, obviously.
Well, I think it comes down to confidence in your spot, frankly.
Sure.
Those guys, and I understand the thought is that you don't want to tip them off to anything being there.
Sure.
You just want to encounter natural movement and be a complete surprise.
Yes.
Whereas anytime you call, they're aware of something.
Yep.
And maybe it brings them in, maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't. So that would be the argument for not calling.
That makes sense, because most of the spots I hunt are less favorable, I would say, just because of it's big woods or, it's a big area that they could cross from. So I'm trying to attract them to a tighter point in the section.
Well, think about it. Yeah, I mean, in a bow hunting situation, calling is the only way to extend your range significantly.
Yes.
If you're not in the perfect spot, like you can still call at them and bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's extremely effective. And both of them guys, I mean, at least Bill, I know, has killed most of his deer have not been right in front of the stand.
Mm-mm.
Like, he called them in.
Yep.
Especially, I mean, during the rut anyways.
Yeah. It's a weird thing, because I guess it's also probably how you grew up and how I grew up, rattling and grunting.
I got
nothing.
I got
at
to tell
the
you,
woods.
I got to tell you, as of today, November 7th, I don't think that I've called in a single deer this year.
Really?
Yeah. For sure have not rattled one in.
I mean, I have not hunted a ton so far this year, but I rattled in that buck I killed in Illinois, as well as several other bucks. And then I rattled in a buck yesterday that I fucked up on.
Yeah. Oh, you rattled him in?
And grunted him in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and so, here, we can talk about that a little bit if you want. Yeah.
Sure.
Just since you bring it up.
Yeah, I messed up.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Hoyt Archery.
Oh, dude, it's almost fall. You and I are both going to be in a tree stand with brand new Hoyt bows. We're going to be shooting the RX-7 carbon bow this year. I know Hoyt's also got the Venoms out, both equally smooth shooting, quiet bows.
Heck yeah, man. And we got a convert on our hands this year. We got a lifelong crossbow guy with a vertical bow in his hands for maybe the first time ever, a good friend of mine. And we've got them all decked out with the inline accessories from the QAD integrated Ultra Rest to the quiver. And also he's got the SL sidebar mount with a couple of stabilizers from Hoyt as well. So that's going to be a sick shooting bow. Yeah,
and Hoyt's been cool enough that anyone listening to this can save 20% on any of the soft good apparels online using the code HUNTR, HUNTR, no E. And if you want to look at the latest lineup of Hoyt bows, check out your local Hoyt dealer.
Get serious? Get Hoyt.
Yeah, so we were talking about, so you're leaving actually tonight to go back to Illinois.
Like from here.
Yep, from here. And so...
And people can look forward to, Dad agreed to, we're going to do a live pod with the dads.
In Kansas.
I think it's live, right?
Yes.
We're going to do live pod.
As long as the internet lets us.
As long as the internet lets us. So we'll have the dads on. And
not like the internet, but the connection of internet.
Right. Oh, the connection will be on. We'll be vibing for sure. We'll get some course banquet rolling. And, and we'll jump on. So, but yeah, right after this, I'm going to pack up the stuff, and I'm rolling to Illinois from here.
Yeah, we'll talk. So you're going to Illinois. So I effectively only have a gun tag left in Illinois, so I'm not going. Mm-hmm. My Ohio place is getting logged, so I could hunt it. I still see some deer, but it's kind of under distress. I'm going to be hunting Kentucky in later November. So I basically said I was just going to hang around home and hunt this week, just get ready for our Kansas trip that we'll talk about here in a second. So the weather has been not great. Warm. It's been warm. So
low pressure stuff.
Yep. Anytime it's warm like that, I always kind of eyeball my mornings for hunt opportunities. Yesterday, so it would have been Monday the 6th, it was like 30 degrees in the morning in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
One of the colder mornings that we're going to have until I think Friday. So I've got one buck that I have been hunting behind my house for several years. In fact, I showed Nick this morning. Looks like his nutsack got ripped off. Like,
really?
It doesn't look good. I'll show you a video.
Recently?
Yeah, like within the last couple days.
What?
Yeah.
How can you see that?
It's on a video of him walking away, and it looks like it's like hanging.
Let me see it.
What would that movie Bad Grandpa?
Yeah.
Where it's like hanging out of his shorts.
Oh no.
Yeah. He looks hurt. He's hurting too, which makes me think about. We're gonna talk about this.
No.
We're gonna talk about this deer here in a second.
So Nick, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me see this. While he's showing me this. Oh.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, something.
He has a weird limp to him.
I would too.
Oh, can you imagine? Here, Nick, I'll ask you this. My uncle likes to ask this question. So I forget what the exact distance is, but they say the strand that connects your nutsack to your body is like 20 foot long. Okay,
wait,
so
what?
there's that much like whatever.
Like
yeah,
condensed. If it's all stretched out, it's 20 feet.
Yeah, like 20 feet long. It's long. So in theory, you could take one of your nuts and set it on a log, you know, let's call it 15 feet away, 20 feet away. So the question is, if it's over there and somebody gives it a flick, do you feel it over there or do you feel it over here?
I think you'd feel it over there. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know. So anyways, I don't.
I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, I hate seeing that for that guy too. But so I have that buck. I've been hunting him for a few years. I've got like a 4-year-old
Dude,
9
speaking
point.
of nuts, that buck that you shot in Kansas had some hellacious testicles on
Wouldn't
him.
even fit in my hands.
Really?
Yeah.
Like one of the first things I said, nice rack. Holy crap, look at these nuts.
Look like the bulldog from Van Wilder, like
Oh my
floating.
God.
They were giant.
They were huge.
That dude was ready to
Yeah.
bust it.
Yeah, he was all rutted up for sure.
There was going to be a doe that shot out like 45 yards.
Scary movie up against the ceiling.
Oh shit. Okay. So anyways, I've got several bucks back. So I only have I have 28 acres to hunt by my house. So not much room and not much room for mistakes, unfortunately. So got in there, I don't know, half hour before daybreak, settled in. I was right off of a little food plot that I built back there, and then I've kind of got this real nice funnel through hardwoods that these connect 2 bedding areas, basically. And so probably I was watching a raccoon for a while, distracted. It was probably right before shooting light. I could see enough in my food plot, but the woods were still a little dark, and I was like, you know, most of the activity I see, because it's only 28 acres, is like right at daybreak. And then it just like tanks off after that or in the evening. So I was probably 6:12, which is give or take right around shooting light. I rattle like pretty hardcore, blind rattle, nothing there. I'm literally going to set the antlers back, and like right behind me, like, and I'm like, oh shit. And I look, and I could see him standing at like 20 yards behind me. And again, it's kind of dark in the woods, light enough that I'm like, that's a pretty good buck. And I think he's looking at me, but I really think he was looking through me to the food plot. Because he was kind of down the hill, and the food plot sits up a little higher. So it looks like he was looking up at me, but I think he was looking through me. So I was able to get the antlers down, and he starts walking towards me, and I know what he's going to do. He's going to go right under my tree.
Are you trying to like figure out what he is at that point?
Yeah.
Are you assuming that it's the big one, or
no? At this point, I'm not assuming it's the big one, because that deer is a big enough frame that I'm like, that would be him. And so he walks directly under my stand, and I look and I can see wide. He was darker, and he was kind of heavy, enough that I knew that it was at least 3 or 4. But I didn't think it was the big one. I still don't think it is, especially now seeing the nut video.
Was that since the shot?
No, that was the night before. But just because of the way that deer was moving, I would have noticed a limp or something. So I let him go. I don't have my bow in my hand either, but I let him go. I grabbed my bow and I let him walk through the food plot because I don't know what deer it is. I'm not.
Why did you rattle so early?
It was light enough that I could shot in the food plot, but not in the woods.
Okay.
On where I was. And honestly, the way that the wind was blowing, I expected every deer to check the south side of this or the north side of this bedding and come from the food plot end. And of course, he came from the other way. So, yeah, in retrospect, messed up. I don't know why. And so he goes to the other end of the food plot, makes a scrape. And I had glassed him at this point, and I could just, like, it's probably 18 plus inches wide. Looks good. Enough that I'm like, I'm going to kill that deer.
I think it was that buck that you got on the video the other day that we figured he was a 3-year-old short G3s. Think it was him?
Could be him, or I've got a 4-year-old 9-point that's been there a lot.
Okay.
So he makes a scrape. At that point, I'm like, I'll shoot this deer. So I grunt at him.
Isn't it funny that just even the percentage of people that don't know?
Yeah.
Even the deer I shot in North Dakota, dude. It's like I didn't know.
Yeah.
Didn't know. I knew it was a shooter, but
Yeah. And I mean, yeah. Once I realized I was going to shoot this, yeah, it was fast.
Indicative of how fast it happens.
Well, my brain, to what we talked about earlier of like, when am I going to shoot? What's his mannerisms? Like my brain's processing 65 other functions at this point.
Yeah.
Which is why I mess up. And so I watch him. He makes a scrape. I grunt at him. He looks, goes back to making a scrape. I kind of give him a roar, and he just frickin' turns and beelines right back to me pretty fast.
How far is he when he's making a scrape?
100 yards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I let him go the whole way across the field because I wanted it to get lighter.
100 yards across the food plot?
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow. I got to see this thing.
Yeah. It drops way down into this bottom now.
Wow.
And so he does exactly what I thought. He's walking the edge of the food plot, wind's coming, and then I know like I said, it's a corridor. He's going to dive down into this corridor, and he does. And as soon as he dives down,
Compound bow.
Yep, compound. I draw back. I've got decent shooting lanes. Good enough that like he walked in, he stopped faster than I thought when I gave him that, and I had to I thought I was going to get another step out of him, and so I kind of had to come back and tuck it in and thump. And I mean, he mule kicked, like all the key signs. I texted you that I was like, hey, shot a buck. He ran off for like 30 yards, stopped.
I was still asleep. Woke up 20 minutes later.
I thought you were hunting.
No.
And I was like,
licking my wounds.
I was like, okay, like fall over. Like it was one of those, he ran far enough that I was like, he's going to fall over. And then he kind of just down over this ditch, and then it's like real hilly down there. Wait a half hour, get down, go over to the arrow, and I'm not impressed, or I'm not happy at all. Like it,
not impressed.
Yeah, I'm not impressed. Kind of baffled at that point. Like it.
Why? Just because
what was on the arrow
looks good. It's just
clean. It's almost clean. Like the first part of the shaft is like just fatty, like like a white streak fat. Then the back part has a little bit of blood and just a little bit of blood on the veins and the lighted knock. Like not what I would have thought of when I was on the shoulder at 12 yards, like cavity wise.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what the fuck? I didn't even look for blood. I just got out, just backed out, went back to the house for an hour, kind of like processing this in my head. And I'm like, man, it seemed right. Like everything seemed good. Go back out after an hour.
At what point had you noticed your dial yet?
No, this is when I did.
Okay.
So when we go back out, I have my bow, and I'm like, always carry my bow in case I need a follow-up shot.
Yeah.
And I go to adjust my dial to 20 because that's where I wanted to be, and I realize it's on 30, which is what I had it set for hunting that stand. And I'm like, God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
So, now at this point, because I told you I thought based on the arrow, it looked brisket or chest. Like I must have somehow with the angle or I hit something.
Yeah, initially thought you hit low.
Yeah, I was like, I went low. I don't know how.
Why did you think that? Because of
the arrow.
Only because of the arrow.
Yeah, because I've seen that look before. People said, hey, what does this arrow look like? I'm like, well, brisket. Like it's fatty with a little bit of blood, but like that deer's not dying.
Yeah.
And that's what my arrow looked like. And so.
Any white hair on it?
Yeah.
Really? Which
was, again, I don't know. And
Is it
so,
possible you hit him way forward?
no,
No.
I don't think so. No, because I mean, it looked, again, I had a lighted knock. It looked like the right shot. So the only thing I can think now is that I hit him high, which would make sense because at that angle it would look right. But if it went higher than I wanted it to, still everything's up. It's 12 yards. It's gonna just.
What do you think is the difference from 20 to 30 yards? Is it like 2-3 inches?
Yep, probably.
3-4 inches?
I haven't shot it. I'm gonna shoot it today, but I bet it's 2 to 3.
Yeah.
And at that angle, 2 to 3 is gonna make a difference, especially if I wasn't on like hard. I was on like mid body, which I probably was.
Sure. What's weird is if you did hit him high, it's like, where'd that white hair come from?
I don't know.
Because it's the white hair's forward and it's down.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. And then, so we go back out. It's just Harlan and I walk like 10 yards, and I'm like, holy shit! Like, there's a lot of blood. So we followed it.
Which would be indicative of a low hit.
You would think so.
Yeah, I would think.
But not with a 30-yard. It's
Because
impossible.
usually on a high lung hit, it takes them a while to fill up before they start.
I've tried to replay, and again, it happens so fast. Like, it's hard to replay it in your head.
Also, how far he's gone would be indicative of a low hit, I think.
I mean, dude, the way that shot looked. Now, here's the only thing that I can't, and it's not an excuse. It's just I don't know. Is like, there were limbs in my shooting lane. I could have clipped a limb and it knocked it down, but my arrow looked pretty buried on the, it didn't look like it hit funky or did anything weird. And so, yeah, we're following blood. And at one point, because I kind of gave Harlan the speech of like, hey, listen, Dad screwed up. Here's why, right? My dial's at 30. I shot this deer 12. I didn't change it. I showed him how it moved. Like, it was a good learning experience for me too. Like, I messed up.
Dad, you're an idiot.
Yeah, you're an idiot. What's wrong with you? And so I kind of told him, I was like, hey, we're gonna go look. I was like, I said we may find some blood, but like, I don't think this deer is dead based on all these reasons.
For what I'll throw this out too, because a lot of guys have said, "Oh, you need a 3-pin thing."
Yeah,
we're shooting the HHA, whatever, the newer ones.
Yeah, the Picatinny one,
and it does have 2 pins on it.
It does,
and so depending on your probably the speed of your bow and stuff like that, mine's perfectly at 20 and 40.
Yeah, mine's a little short, so mine's like 20 and 35, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the other thing is like I like that clear sight window of a single pin more than the multi pins, and again, not that I'm saying we'll shoot. We practiced at 70, 80 yards, and that's tough with a multi-pin.
Yeah. It is.
So, yeah, and I mean,
pros and cons. I mean, it's also a disadvantage that it's like the pin needs moved, or I mean, that's where the 2-pin is kind of a saving grace. If there's a variability in yardage that you're shooting, is like I know that directly between my 2 pins is 30, and then my second pin is 40. So I don't really have to move my thing 40 and in.
Yeah, and I mean,
I do, but
I've been shooting single pin for, I don't know, 8
just what you
years.
like is what it comes down to.
And this is the first time I messed up. It's on me.
It happens.
It's a user error. So we follow blood, and I mean, at probably 50 or 60 yards, I was like, hey man, we're, just stick behind me, because any of these little knobs, he's probably gonna, because this deer's pouring blood. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It's the easiest blood trail I followed in a long time. Like, your dad's deer bled in Kansas, way more than that. Super, like, I'm just walking and I could see it out in front of me, just painted. And like every knob we get to, I'm like, nope, not there, not there, not there. We finally get clear down in the creek. We're 280 yards into this search, and there's like a little thicket on the other side of the creek and then the main road. And I'm out of property basically at that point. And so I was like, I'm going to back out. I had Emily drop me off down at the bottom to come in. So if he was along the creek, I pushed him back into my property if he was still alive. Got in there, walked a couple feet, found the blood trail on the other side of the creek. Literally, I've got a picture. I could see the blood trail across the 2-lane highway. Like, I saw him bleeding across the 2-lane highway. So now in Pennsylvania, you have to have permission to go look for that deer. Even if I call the game warden, he can't take me across unless they give me permission. Fortunately, the first yard was a game warden's house. So we texted him, and he was like, yeah, man. He's like, go for it. So I followed blood trail into his yard.
Interesting. You got a neighbor that's a game warden?
Yeah, I think he lives in Greene County now, though.
Oh.
But he owns that house.
Oh, okay.
I think he rents it. And then the next 2 properties, like no permissions.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I spent the majority of the day trying to get a hold of
They
someone.
were no's or just no, you couldn't get a hold of them?
Can't get a hold of them.
Yeah.
So I can't
Still
look.
can't. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and at that point, I'm 550, 560 yards in. And I mean, the blood, I sent you some of the pictures. Like the blood's, I mean, it's lung blood, it looks like at least.
We're kind of at a lot. Yeah, there's
a lot of it.
a lot of it. I mean,
I couldn't believe, and so at that point, 500 plus yards in, I've not found a bed yet, which is discouraging, but it's also like, I'm completely puzzled. Like whether I hit high or low, I know that I definitely hit lung, and he's bleeding a lot. I don't understand why that deer never, and I don't think I ever pushed him. Like I got out of there. Like the fact that he crossed that road to go back up into this mountain, it's literally a mountain on the other side of the road. I have no idea. Like just kind of beyond me. So again, no answer on permission. I can't go look. So it was kind of like, well, what about drone? And it's like, this is perfect case.
yeah.
Because my hope is,
That was the first thought.
yeah, my hope is, and this is, I get it, right? If you live in Pennsylvania, landowners in Pennsylvania are weird, man. Nobody wants you on your property. Like they just don't. It's not farm country where I'm at. I'm in suburban America, basically. And obviously it's peak rut. Like they don't want me gridding their property. I wouldn't, I'd let somebody on it, but I wouldn't be happy about them having to grid my property.
Well, nobody wants people on their property. I mean, I feel like if you'd gotten a hold of those people, I mean, chances are most people are going to say yes.
Yep.
Yeah, some people will not. But.
So, and again, it's on me. Like if I made the right shot, that deer doesn't go that far, and I'm not in this situation. But it is what it is. So, Tyler from Skyhound Deer Recovery had wrote us previously, and basically offered to drive the 3 hours to my house to look. So that's like all. This is at like 1 o'clock or so. And he's like, hey, it has to get dark so the air temperature drops and the thermal signature will pick up on that deer.
It was funny to be in that situation because the first thing, we have to ask her, we're like, is it legal here? It's legal, right? And we're like, I don't know. We're like, well, text Mike Yoder. We just had him on, and and also ask that guy. And then I
texted wardens
that
I
called,
knew.
Called a couple.
I called the Game Commission headquarters office, of which really nice lady answered. And I gave her the situation and she said, no. And I said, no, like I can't use it at all. No, I can't use it. She's like, they're illegal. You cannot use them. And I said, where's that listed at? And she's like, well, in the definition of hunting, recovering that deer is covered, which is a gray area. And so I then texted some of the wardens I know.
So maybe spell that out a little bit too. So like, this is where we're drawing the line between hunting and recovering. Is there a difference? Is there not?
And we get it.
What she's saying is that the state of Pennsylvania defines recovery as an aspect of the hunt. Ergo, you cannot use a drone for the recovery.
And in the definition, where it's covered is there is a specific call out to tracking of wildlife, of which she's saying the drone locating is tracking of the wildlife. I get it.
Well, that left us wondering, like, okay, well, whose call is that? Like, who can we call to give us the gray interpretation of this law? Like, so
there is but a lawyer or a judge. From what I ended up like later in the evening, because I just talked to so many people, they basically said it's up to your local warden and the judge who's going to put you in court. And obviously, like, we don't want to be in court for this thing. Like, I'm not going to make, I want to do everything I can to recover this deer.
Sure.
A lot of people suggested dogs, which are legal in Pennsylvania. The problem is I don't have access to even
permission.
Yeah, I don't have even permission to walk on it, let alone take a dog on it.
Right.
So, I mean, you're shit out of luck.
Well, that's the advantage of a drone over a dog, is that you don't need permission to fly a drone over a property.
Over 100 feet.
So if you can go and
airspace.
find it. I mean, dude, if you came to me, if I owned the property and I was a hunter and I wanted to not go trudging through there during rut, I would almost suggest to you, I'd be like, dude, listen, hire a drone, throw it up. If you guys can find it, let's go get it. I'm all for it.
Yeah, it would cost me $400 plus travel, which I was more than willing to do. All I wanted to know is I didn't care if the deer was still alive. Like, if he was alive and he was going to survive it, it's just peace of mind at that. You owe it to the deer to figure that out.
Well, and with blood like that, I mean, we got to believe that thing's dead.
Yeah, I 100% believe. I'm still gonna, even later this week, and I hate it because the meat and stuff's not gonna be. wrote a couple of these guys on Facebook, and I said, hey, listen, if you see buzzards or anything like that, if you're cool with me going up there, like, just let me look real quick.
Yeah.
So the thought process is, if I could get that drone in there and locate the deer, let's say he is dead, found the deer, he's dead. I can go to those landowners and this time say, hey, I don't need walking permission. Like, literally, he's right here. You could go with me. We know exactly where he's at, in and out, clean extraction. Don't worry. And they could still tell me no, but at that point, I've done everything I can. So the bottom line is, it comes back in that in Pennsylvania, there is a statute around hunting that includes electronic devices. And it's basically, if it's not included, it's a legal list. And transparently, I've ran into this in Missouri too. So when I lived in Missouri, right, I used trail cameras on public land, fully admit it. They were apparently illegal. Now they are for sure illegal. They've made the statement. But back then it was...
And they were illegal because they weren't
on the list.
There was, yeah.
Because they weren't on the list, it was illegal.
Right.
They've now made that...
the precedent being, if we haven't written a law for to include it,
yeah,
it's just assume it's illegal.
And everybody that I've talked to is fully aware and admitting that it's just they can't keep up with the changing evolution of technology.
On the enforcement side of it. So
on
you're
the
saying,
enforcement side.
the game commission, whoever's creating the policies,
which is legislators.
The technology is evolving too quickly for us to, make laws about. It's the same thing you're seeing with like regulation of technology companies, of
absolutely.
of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Absolutely. Can't keep up fast enough.
Right.
So bottom line was, I did what the law said, which is I called off Tyler at Skyhound and said, hey man, I appreciate you wanting to come out here.
Funny, both the drone guys were like, yeah, they both were like, yeah. So because Mike texted me back and was like,
they're not legal. They're not lawyers.
They said it's not illegal.
Yes.
I forget exactly what he said.
Because it's not stated.
Yeah, but then also said, I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not giving legal advice. Which, he probably has to say that.
Which I think by the terms of service, and I don't blame them, it's liability, right? They're waiving themselves to
100%.
all liability.
Yeah,
so it would be on me. And
so then you're faced with the question, do I do what's... there's different, perspectives on what's ethical, because it's not ethical to trespass. It's not ethical to go on somebody else's property. It's not.
It's not, no.
But it's also not ethical to let a deer that
I know,
is
dude,
dead.
I was sick over the fact that it had gone that far. I was sick over the fact that I knew that deer was probably dead or dying.
All right.
At whatever, 10 o'clock in the morning. And it was just, there's nothing else I can do. My hands are tied. I've tried everything to get access. I've tried to get a drone up there. Like, you can't do it. And a lot of the people I've talked to have said, man, we kind of wish somebody would just do it and get caught so it goes to court and then a precedence is set.
And you're like, it ain't going to be me.
It ain't going to be me. Yeah. As much as I want to recover this deer and I owe it to that deer, I can't do it. Right. Here was what was really funny though, is so like, dude, once you stoke a fire like that, like I'm on a roll. So I start looking more and I get into these electronic devices, of which include rangefinders, etc. I'm talking to a warden. I said, hey, let me ask you a question. And there's electronic devices that state these are legal to use. I said, are trail cameras in there? He said, no. I said, there's millions of them out in Pennsylvania. He's like, then it comes back to like, are trail cameras aiding in the hunt? Yes, they are.
Yeah, what do you think?
Absolutely are. He's like, well, you could make an argument that traditional cameras can't because it's in retrospect. And I was like, okay, well then cell cameras for sure are. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, so you're telling me that all of these people, including myself, are using trail cameras that by Pennsylvania's electronic law are not legal and everybody's cool with it, but the drone that is in the exact same position as the trail camera is a complete no, is the moment I call headquarters. I said, that's not right. I said, dude, you guys got to figure out your black and white shit real fast.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Well, I mean, that's the reality. It's like, yeah. I mean, I think the enforcement officers want to pretend a lot of times like things are black and white, and it's like, not really.
Well, and we get it, right? I mean, the bottom line is there are several bad apples out there who will misuse a thermal drone and ruin it for everybody, right? I mean, we know what they're going to do.
And, yeah, anybody under the right circumstances will misuse technology.
I know there's been cases already where people have been using it to scout for bears in cornfields, to determine if they're going to drive out the cornfield for bear season and stuff earlier this year, and they got caught. And those are the guys who screw it up for everyone. Of course, as soon as that happens, the state legislature is like, yeah, these are illegal. We can't use them because somebody abuses them. This also coming from a state that allows spotlights till 11 p.m. as long as there's not a weapon in your vehicle. Which, here's another thing, by the way. If you track a deer past 11 p.m. with the use of lights, it's illegal.
Really?
Because it's only up till 11 p.m., including the spotlight side. And you can't have a weapon with you either.
Interesting.
So if you're tracking a buck, like if you hit a buck at dark and you're like,
why is
I'm going to come back.
Do they only patrol till 11 p.m.?
No, that's the law.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with patrolling and enforcing. That's the law.
I got to believe at some point there was a thought as to, hey, when do we end this?
I'm sure.
The same reason they ended. There's no spotting during the gun season, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. During the archery season?
During archery season, yes.
You can, yeah.
Yep, as long as you don't have a weapon in your vehicle till 11 p.m.
Makes sense.
But yeah, if you're tracking a deer at night,
you have to wrap it up at 11 p.m.
And if you have your bow with you, it's illegal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it would be illegal because you can't shoot them over spotlight at night.
I just think
it's funny.
I'm just saying this because there's a lot of us that, just think about the commonalities. Think of shooting a buck right at dark, and you're going to find it. Like, do you leave your bow at the house? I'm sure most people get out of the tree stand and they carry their bow right to the deer.
Well, it's funny. I mean, speaking of gray area, and imagine those two scenarios where, you could just say, hey, so-and-so shot a deer under a spotlight.
Yep.
First thought is like, oh, boy, wow, that's a serious offense, But the reality could be like, hey, that's a super ethical hunter that, shot that deer at last light, and they know it was a questionable hit, so they take their weapon with them, and maybe an hour or 2 hours after dark, the deer requires another arrow.
That's illegal.
To put them down. And that's where you have to draw the line somewhere, like...
and it's because people ruin it for everybody else.
Well, yeah, dude,
it's
people
the
are people.
Abuse, it's the abuse of the law side of it. I mean, it just comes down to, like, there's a lot of... and I get it. Obviously, talk to me about thermal drones 2 years ago, I wouldn't even know what the hell you were talking about, right? Like, it's the rapid evolution of some of this stuff, but there's some archaic laws in place, including this. The fact that trail cameras haven't been updated on that electronic list for Pennsylvania is ridiculous. So, like, there's some archaic laws that have, then again, this is coming from a state that we can't hunt most Sundays either. So, you got to stay up with some of these things. I think that's where, a Mike Rexon at Ohio DNR has done a really good job. I know Missouri's updated a lot of things lately. So there are a lot of states that are keeping it. It's just, this goes back to who is the master puppeteer here, and it's the legislature. And they just move at a different pace, right? They're going to argue for 6 months and then say, yeah, this isn't passed. We're not going to make that amendment.
Yeah. I guess I can see both sides of it. Like, yeah, I think it's ridiculous. The trail cameras haven't necessarily... Well, see, and I don't know. It's not like I'm tracking these issues on a daily basis. Maybe it has come up, and then they've considered, well, we should put it on this list, or maybe there's some reason for that, but... There's also a lot of shit that these people got to deal with. Like, and I'm not.
Oh, too much. Those enforcement guys, though.
Well, I'm just saying. In general, it's like, the world's kind of going to shit anyways. So it's, so in one sense you could say, how have they not accounted for trail cameras and drones? But the other sense is like, hey, maybe they have more important things going on. So I can extend grace in that aspect. But yeah, certainly I think it deserves attention. It should be kept up with.
Yeah.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Muddy.
Man, Jared, we probably have been using Muddy products for at least 10 years now.
It's a long time, dude.
It's been a long time. And I can remember when it was simply just safety harnesses and camera arms of all things. And, that's evolved to where you and I both have a bunch of Muddy box blinds as well.
I would say a bunch. But yeah, they've come a long way. And certainly the box blinds are huge. Shot that buck over your shoulder out of a Muddy box blind a couple of years ago. The harness and all of the other safety accessories really are a major component of what Muddy offers for me. We've had some injuries in the past. Some tree stand accidents. This is all back before we were using, frankly, harnesses, the lineman's belt while we're hanging stuff, and the safe lines. I have those in every single one of, our fixed tree stands now. And We really have made safety a priority. That's a big deal for us. And, Muddy has everything we need for that.
Yeah, and I think the cool thing about Muddy is anyone listening to the HUNTR Podcast can save 20% using the code HUNTR20. That's HUNTR20. Anything that you can see on the Muddy Outdoors store online, use that code, save yourself 20% for this hunting season.
Go Muddy.
So anyways, yeah, long way around that, but I've had a lot of people ask, like, what do I do next? I'm a bit shit out of luck at this point. So I've been keeping on getting permission. So transparently, one property I have a really good chance of getting access to. The other property, the owners, I think, have both recently passed. And I don't know if their son has it or if it's in an estate. It's been a mess trying to get access to it. So I don't know about that one. The other one I do think I'll get access to. And I'm basically out of kind of just, I guess, respect for the animal and possible recoveries. I'm just going to sit on my buck tag for a while and in Pennsylvania and hopefully get access and try to, I mean, with as warm as it's going to be, there'll be buzzards and stuff on that deer pretty quickly. Yeah. And coyotes. So I'm hoping maybe even we're filming this on Tuesday, maybe Thursday, being able to try to get out there and at least, eye for buzzards or something. I can see the ridge from my front porch where the deer ran to. So if I can see buzzards or anything over there, maybe I'll be able to get access. And then, at some point, then, I've kind of done all I can on it. So,
yeah.
And then also just kind of see if I can figure out which deer it actually was from my cameras, because I'm not sure. I had one buck show up last night that I rolled out. It was I think he's probably I think he's a 3-year-old 8-point. He showed up last night, so it wasn't him. Could have been a completely different buck, right? It was November 6th too, so you never know. But it sucks. Again, user error on my side for not changing that and not taking my time, and that was a first for sure. Probably won't be the last, but it happens.
I mean, dude, it happens fast. Like things can fall apart so quickly. Like it's amazing how you can just mentally prepare yourself for a hunt or whatever, and then you go through all these steps to make sure that you're ready. Practicing with your bow all season, and it's like it's like the minute you see that buck, it's like things happen. Like,
they start to fall.
You drop stuff, you squeak stuff,
I felt good about everything. I
shot at a coyote the other day, dude, and I shot with my 40-yard pin. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, and I practice like more than
I know.
Yeah,
it's the hardest part I think for me is that and this from my trail, like I'm a bloodhound. And so like I had a really easy follow for 500 and some yards.
Yeah.
Given the chance to be able to keep going, I would have tracked him for a mile. I don't care.
Sure.
But I couldn't. And that's the disadvantage of having 28 acres is like you run out of ground pretty quick. Like you make a shot, you run out of ground pretty quick before you have to recover them. And, there was a property that's behind me that if you ran up into, I've already talked to him. I'm pretty much a go to recover anything on there. I can't believe that deer, it crossed a 2-lane highway. I can't freaking believe that he did it, but he did it. And, just kind of is what it is. And like I said, I'll keep looking and keep people updated, but, not how I thought the day was going to go when I found all that blood, but
as they say, that's bow hunting.
That is bow hunting. Probably would have killed him with a crossbow. Okay,
crossbow.
Let all the trolls out now. I mean, it is what it is, and I don't know. I'm just really surprised that, it just goes to show how tough these freaking animals are. Like that deer bled so much. I cannot believe he didn't lay down.
Yeah,
and I could get it if I was on his trail like right away and I was bumping him. But I mean, there's nothing to spook him unless something got on him. Like I do have coyotes and stuff. Like unless something else bumped him, I don't understand why that deer kept pushing as far as he did, because he went into some thick stuff and he didn't lay down, which seems really counterintuitive to a hurt deer.
You remember that low hard hit that Winky had several years ago?
I think so.
Remember watching that? And his, his approach was contrary to like what a lot of people say or would think is give him time.
He pushed him.
His thought on that was, well, it's a low heart hit, and I don't want it to heal, basically, to clot up or
Pump
whatever.
it open.
I want to keep. He's like, even if I am pushing the deer and it requires acreage or whatever,
that's my disadvantage
to do that. Do you know? Did he ever get that deer?
I think so.
He did.
I do think so.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to know what to do in that scenario because it's like, man, for sure, if the deer is going to bed up and die, then you obviously want to just give them space.
Which is what I mean, I thought he was going to tip at 30 yards. Then obviously seeing my arrow, I had my second doubts. But like when I found the blood, like,
yeah,
there was no doubt. I even told Harlan, I was like, hey man, I said, this is pure luck. Like we're going to find this deer but it's not because of that I made a great shot and stuff. I just got lucky.
Yeah. And
then like we're just continuing to, I mean, I had him in front of me for part of it. I'm like, hey, just follow blood. And he's just like, yep, here's blood, here's blood, here's blood. Like it was super easy. And then like every time we would get around one of these kind of nooks to where it would drop down on the bottom and that deer's not there, I'm like, what the hell? Like just didn't compute, which, I mean, if no disrespect to like a 2 or 3 year, most of those young bucks I think would have thrown in the towel and laid down at some point. Those mature bucks are just freaking tough, dude. Yeah, they just don't want to handle that. Yeah. So
and they're all rutted up too, so they're just
straight adrenaline.
Yeah, half the time you shoot them things and they don't care. They're like, I'm gonna keep going. That hurt, but I'm gonna keep going, and they're like, oh
yeah. So I don't know. I mean, again, I played over again. Obviously, had I adjusted my dial, that deer probably would have went down in 30 yards. But in retrospect, that's how it was. And I followed everything that I could for as long as I could. And, hopefully buzzards or whatever, I'll have a chance to get up there and find them here.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, but I think you did everything right. I mean, not everything right, but you did everything you could to follow up on the shot. There's nothing you can.
I was really excited to see the drone recovery in action. Not that I ever think that it would be on my own deer.
Well, and probably optimistic that you're like, this thing's found.
Well, you told me, you're like, yeah, dude, if he's there, they'll find him.
Yeah,
which is awesome because I'm like, great. Even if he's alive, I just want to know.
What's the other say? Within 1,000 yards of last blood. So you'd already followed.
Oh, dude, I knew exactly where either that last blood was or where that deer was going to be. And so I'm like, yeah, they're going to find this deer, and I'll at least know. And let's say they even found him dead. If I can't get access to him, I did everything I possibly could to recover that deer. And so now there's this kind of gap there where I still feel like I did everything I could, but it's just there's the unknown. Whereas, like, with that drone, I would at least known he's dead, he's alive, he's not there, whatever. Like, I told Tyler, I was like, hey, dude, even if you comb that area and you're like, I can't find him, I'm like, well, maybe the shot wasn't as good as I thought.
It is funny to consider, like, all the different regulation and stuff. And that's where I extend some grace, I think, to the wardens and to, people making laws and stuff. It's like, there's so many different scenarios.
Sure.
Imagine a scenario where drones are legal. And you find the deer on another person's property, but they can still deny you access to go get it.
I know they could. Yep.
And like in some senses, like I can understand that. Like, let's say, the neighborly relationship has reached a point where it's like, listen, yeah, these guys shoot deer every other day, and they all die on my always die.
Yeah, I get it.
Do you continue to allow it, or but on the flip side, it's like, man, if you shot a deer and it's for sure dead, and you know exactly where it's at, like, they should be able to go recover that deer, I feel.
Well, and I think that the gray area that you both of us are on is like, let's say they would have came out, if it was legal. They came out, they found that deer, he's alive. Now it's on me to decide, is it ethical and legal to go and up to that deer to shoot him again or not? The answer is no.
So hard.
But morally, you probably want to put that deer out of its misery, to kill it. But from a legality standpoint, it's not legal. Once that deer's located by that drone, if you go up and shoot it, it is illegal. You have now used that in the aid of a hunt.
Yep. And that's true. That is the
law. It's just, where's the moral and the ethics come in versus the legality come in? And, fortunately, I guess I don't have to make that decision, but I know a lot of people have had to make that decision, and I'm sure a lot of people have gone and shot them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just scratching my head. I'm not leaving.
Yeah. I'm not fucking leaving. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people, and I don't blame them because, I mean, yeah. The hard part is that maybe 90% of hunters would always appreciate and use that correctly. The 10% who abuse it, screw it up for everybody else. Just like anything in the world.
What do you mean, abuse what?
If the legality of using a drone to locate that deer. 90% of people would
How
use
would they
it.
misuse it?
They'd use it for finding the deer to hunt. They'd scout them and be like, oh, there's that buck, I'm going to go in and kill him. Or there's that bear, I'm going to go in and kill him.
One that's been hit already.
No. Just like use of the drone to hunt.
Which is really tough for whitetails. I mean, that would be a really hard thing to do.
I mean, it would be hard
What
to
is
make...
knowing where the deer... I mean, yeah, maybe you could go get in a stand knowing that he's in a... But, yeah.
I mean...
I don't think the opportunity is as high as like what you said for driving a field out if a bear's in it.
Sure.
Like, that's pretty obvious. He's there. We're going to go drive him out.
Well, I mean, if you're...
or a hit deer. You know, I mean, that's where it's a really great.
Yeah,
area.
I mean,
like,
whitetails
hey,
are just are super mobile, so it's hard. But, I mean...
Also super, like, you're not going to stop
Well, I mean, from rumors that I've heard from some of the law enforcement is that people are using thermal drones, and they're then using cell phones to call their buddies and guide them to them. Like, they're watching their buddies and telling them where these deer are and stuff to get in a position to kill them.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's illegal, but I mean, and so those are the things that people are doing that are preventing the 90% of us who would love to have that as an opportunity to use. We can't because these 10% are screwing it up.
Yeah, well, that's always going to be the case. I mean,
and that's why they'll never make it legal, in my opinion.
Never make it legal.
And
yeah.
That's the position I got. Is like, we either can do this or we can do this, but we have to be black and white. And if we do this, there's going to be a bunch of people that abuse it. I did ask, not switching subjects too much, but I did ask about, just we're into the heat of season and stuff, about baiting. Crazy, man. In Pennsylvania, how many people are baiting? It's off the charts.
You asked a warden?
Mm-hmm. I just said, hey, I said, I see people coming out of Rural King all the time with deer corn. And I said, I don't think they're going to West Virginia or Ohio to put it out. Like, they're using it in Pennsylvania. I said, how bad is our baiting issue in Pennsylvania? He said, off the charts. He said, we probably catch 5% of the people. And the only people that we catch is because a hunter who abides by the law reports somebody else.
Right.
He said, other than that,
how would you catch them?
Yeah. You don't. Yeah. He said, but yeah, we probably catch 5% of the people that are actually baiting out there.
Yeah. Well, I told you, when I was dropping your hide off and stuff the other day, I was just talking with Trav, he sees a lot of deer come in. I mean, he's, so I really, I think he's got a really good perspective of like kind of what's happening, at least in our area of Ohio. I'm like, dude, what kind of quality of deer are coming in? What kind of age, what kind of weapons are they getting killed with and stuff? And it was really interesting and I speculated that it would be the case, but he confirmed. He's like, dude, at least 90% of the deer that come in are off corn piles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least 90. He's like, at least 70 of them have like corn in their mouth, like, because they came out for everybody. So they know, they can tell, right?
I mean, do you think, and I assume it just varies by area, but let's use Pennsylvania, for example, and in the illegal
90%. Can you, dude? I'm sorry to.
I mean,
90%.
It's legal.
Almost. It almost like you could go so far as to say is like there's no hunting in Ohio anymore. You're just basically baiting and killing.
I mean,
that's what's left
because it's legal and because it's one of the easier means to attract a deer. Yeah, no, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, no, nor am I. Yeah.
I just wondered in Pennsylvania, in a state that's it's illegal to use it, how much more effective is bait when people are illegally using it? Substantially? Like, I guess what I'm saying is, like, let's say in Ohio, like, here's a block of 1,000 acres, everybody's baiting. These deer are kind of still equally distributed per the bait. In Pennsylvania, where there's a 1,000-acre block and maybe there's one guy breaking the law, I would assume his bait pile is way more effective.
Depends on the size of the bait pile, I guess. Like how often, how much, what it is.
And I mean, I've killed
deer.
It
doesn't hurt their chances.
We've killed deer on the mountain multiple times. I think I killed one too that I found corn in, and there isn't a freaking cornfield within 3 miles of us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it just, I wanted to hear it from law enforcement that I wasn't on drugs, that it's in it. You can't blame them, but like, it's because it's freaking sold at every store readily available. Deer corn right in the front aisle, Rural King or Tractor Supply. It's like, dude, this is illegal. You can't use this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't. Is that an industry issue? Like, is the industry pushing that to say, "Hey, sell my whatever record rack deer corn or whatever it is"?
I mean, the stores, they're going to sell whatever they can sell, right?
I mean, should you be allowed to sell something that's illegal to use?
I don't know. It's a fair question because you could buy it there and take it somewhere else, and that's legal. So how can you tell somebody what they can sell or can't sell? But
I used to have the same issue with muzzleloaders. Like before this whole early season inline muzzleloader thing and stuff, there was a period where it was only flintlocks, and they would sell percussion cap muzzleloaders in Dick's Sporting Goods, especially. And I'm like, you realize that's illegal? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, can't use that. Like, it has to be a flintlock after Christmas. And they're like, well, if people buy them, they buy them. And it's like, It's illegal. Why would you sell it in a state that it's not legal to do?
I don't know. I mean, what else is like that? That are there other things out there that you can buy it in a state that it's illegal in? Honestly, weed is one of the things that
which I mean is very restricted.
I'm thinking of, but you can't buy it in a state where it's not legal.
I mean, the only other things I can think of is I know there's some states where you can buy beer at Walmart, but they don't do beer sales on a Sunday. So it's available on the shelf, but you can't check out with it.
What states do that? Pennsylvania would be one if I had to guess.
Maybe. I want to say Missouri's one.
Well, but that's new. Did you
Well, you couldn't buy beer in any store in Pennsylvania. You had to go to a 6-pack shop or a distributor.
It used to be so bizarre when I would go to Ohio.
Yeah.
And I would see beer in the gas stations.
Sure.
I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
Because we'd come back home and
you
none
had
of
to
the
go to a distributor to buy a case of beer.
Yeah, now Sheetz and everybody's got their whole beer. That's half their
beer
business,
cave.
probably. Yeah.
No, I think Missouri. I think it's Missouri. I think that's where I ran into it because I think I was out there and it was on a Sunday and I didn't know. I was like, oh, I'll buy beer because I hadn't been able to buy it in a grocery store and they're like, oh, it's Sunday and I'm like, what?
Okay.
I mean, but it was readily available on the shelf. You just couldn't check out with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's about all I can think of is weed, alcohol, and deer corn.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, I've
what about cell cams? I bet you, in Utah and stuff, but you can still buy cell cameras.
I bet you can too.
In the stores.
I bought, in certain online stores, I know that if you put in your state that they can't sell certain things to you or they can't ship certain things to you. California is probably the most notorious for that. We can't ship this to California. But you could technically buy it, but the moment your shipping address is in there, you can't have it in that state. You can't use it. It's cold air inductions, the air filter.
Yep.
We couldn't ship to California. They weren't legal, but you could buy it in Arizona and then take it into California.
Right.
So obviously, and I think I've done it. I've gone to Rural King and bought corn and taken it to my farm in Ohio.
Sure.
So I'm not saying that everybody's doing that, but the vast majority of people that are buying corn in Rural King and the middle Pennsylvania is not taking it out of state.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. State lines are weird, dude. It's funny being in areas where time zones are right there. Where we hunted in North Dakota,
Yeah.
literally people could choose.
If you were on Central or Mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So in the same town, you had people deciding which time zone that they wanted to abide by. So they were constantly an hour off in either direction.
I bet school was a cluster at that
Yeah,
place.
they're like, I don't subscribe to this time zone here. We'll be there at 8.
You say I'm late. I say
when
I'm
I
an
say
hour
8,
early.
what I really mean is 7. It'll be 7. Your time.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's I think I ran it on Instagram a little bit about the drone thing, but and again, I'm taking blame for it, which is not easy for me. I don't take faults very easily.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm just not a good person with that. But my wife will tell you that too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just because I try really hard at everything. So if it messes up, I'll admit it, but I don't like doing it. And
I mean, what do you mean? What's the alternative? Just denial?
Yeah, probably denial or excuses or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, I'm good.
Reasons.
I'm good for that. I'll keep you honest.
Yeah. So no, this was, completely on me for biffing the shot. But yeah, I just don't like, again,
it happens
to the try of all you can. I don't like missing the opportunity to do everything possible to locate that deer.
Well, that's how you learn too, man. I think guys want to, whether they just literally don't know what happened, or I think a lot of times they do realize and they don't want to admit, especially getting smelled by deer or getting seen by deer.
Mm-hmm.
You don't hear guys talking about that a whole lot, I think.
No.
Dude, people, you get some out. People get blown at. You know what I mean? They see you. Things happen all the time.
Well, a
lot of guys don't want to admit. They don't want to admit that a deer was on edge.
Yeah.
And it's not like you're admitting like that you even did something. It's just like, dude, that's hunting. You
Well,
know,
a lot of people write me personally and are like, dude, like at least you like owned up to it. Like a lot of these guys would never even fucking say anything. They would just tuck it under a rug and not even talk about it. And that's one thing I learned even directly from Winky is Winky's made a lot of bad shots and he's very open about it, you know, and it's just, that's how it is. And, you know, I don't have anything to hide. I'm a human. I'm not perfect. Like it just happens, you know? And so, yeah, it sucks. And I hate it for the deer. And, you know, what I don't like is just cause I do consume a ton of venison every year is like, if I find that deer, let's say they call me today and they're like, yeah, go for it. It's bad. It's been 70 degrees.
So is the hide.
Yeah. So
so you're looking at a European mount at best. Yeah. And the meat's a bummer as well.
Yeah. Which, you know, then is like, oh, great. I just, you know, I got him for the antlers, which is shitty.
Well, it's a part of it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
It just, you know, I don't like, I would rather have had the opportunity to like recover the deer versus
you want to use everything
now
you
it's
can.
You scavenge for them.
Sure.
So yeah, it sucks on that part. And, you know,
I mean, some of this, a lot of that is out of your control, though, dude. I mean, you can only just make the best shot with the situation that you have there. I mean, so it is worth asking, and you know, with the things that you could have changed, it's like, what could you have done any differently? You know, even all the way back to like, would I have rattled before daylight?
No, I wouldn't.
Is a decision. Would I have done something different with your pin setup or configuration? You know.
I would have died. The only things that I would have changed in retrospect is maybe I wouldn't have rattled as early as I did. That said, by the time he got across the field and I called him back, it was fine. And the really thing comes down to is I would have adjusted my pin to 20.
Yeah. Would you have gotten on the blood trail as quickly? You know, those are decisions.
Yeah.
You know, and so basically what you have to go on there is, what does my arrow look like?
Which didn't look good. That's why I backed out.
And where did I see where I hit him?
Which I thought.
Because if you didn't, at that point, that should have been the only thing that had you go. And I guess you can start to look for blood. I mean, put
it this way. When he stopped, there was a smaller, probably 4 or 5 inch sapling here. When he stopped, I had front shoulder and just a little bit behind his front leg. So I couldn't have hit back. I could have hit up, down, or I could have hit forward.
Yep.
And I mean, I tucked it pretty tight onto his shoulder. At 12 yards, I was confident with that setup blown right through him.
Yeah.
And when it shot, I mean, it sounded great, which is why when he ran at 30 yards, I was like, he's going to fall.
Yeah.
And then he didn't. And so, but because also at 12 yards and he's downhill, I'm at a pretty steep angle there. And so if I am shooting 2 inches high, let's just say with the 30-yard pin versus the 20, and he's at 12, maybe it is 3 inches high, at that angle, it's high. It may not even have caught close lung. It may only caught far lung.
Right.
And that initial part could have been fat from around, you know, his back, basically, back fat down in. But because of the way that the angle looked, you know, and it's at daybreak, like it looked like a good shot. Like right behind the shoulder, I saw it go. But I mean, you know, that's
the best information you can get is, where'd you hit him? That's 80% of it.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, if you see where you hit them, then the rest is kind of like a wash.
Which is why I was confused when I saw the arrow. Because when I got down out of the tree and I looked at the arrow, I'm like, what the hell? Like I expected that thing to be coated because it looked like, you know, it looked like a great hit.
And the arrows, I mean, because it's like, it goes through a lot, right? It's going through hide, it's going through fat in some cases, going through rib or bone in some cases, also going through vital organs, hopefully, or some sort of other
arteries,
muscular, you know. So the arrow is not always going to be 100%. Like typically, if you get guts, you'll smell guts. Typically, if it's straight vital organs, you're likely to have good blood on it and stuff. But if it comes in or out of or through like a really fatty substance, like there's a likelihood it gets cleaned off, you know, as it's coming out. So I think your shot placement would tell you, you're like, I think it was a good shot. The arrow looks weird, but you know, I need to at least see what my blood looks like from there.
And 5 yards, it was spraying.
And you start finding really good blood. So I mean,
everything indicated, because it was when we stopped the first time. Harlan had to go to school, so we backed out. It was an hour and 45 minutes after I shot. And then it was another 2 hours it was probably another an hour. It's probably 2 hours and 45 minutes before I picked it up again. I mean, that deer had plenty of time to lay down and die without being pressured. He just didn't. He just didn't lay down.
So what is your rule of thumb with, I've heard, and I've also seen like pretty big variations in like the time that you try to give an animal based on the hit that you think you have. So like
I'm usually an hour guy minimum, regardless, unless I see him fall.
Okay.
If I see him fall, then I that kind of goes out the window.
So I think heart and lungs is kind of no question. Everybody kind of agrees like, hey, you should see them go down, but if not, it's a half hour to an hour.
Yeah, I'm still
and they're probably dead within 5 minutes. I mean,
yeah, I'm still usually an hour guy just on the edge of caught. By the time you get packed up and you get out or do anything,
it's amazing how fast some of these deer will die. I mean, if you double lung them deer, I mean, that thing's dead a minute, 2 minutes sometimes.
Yep.
They just fall over, stone dead.
Mm-hmm.
But if you hit them in the liver, I know is a big question mark for a lot of guys. And also, the difference between 2 lungs and 1 lung is
which is where I think
probably where my biggest question mark is at.
Yeah.
It's like, how much time do you give a deer hit in the liver or in a single lung? And I'll finish that by saying, I think some guys will say a liver could be 12 hours, 12 or more.
Which is hard for me to think of because I've
also seen deer die like a double lung hit.
Yeah, I've shot a bunch of deer in the liver. I killed that big Kansas buck, the liver.
Oh God, I livered him.
Yeah, I mean that deer. We gave that deer 2 hours, but he was probably dead within 5 minutes. He wherever he ran to his first bed, he died. That buck that I shot in Illinois, though I probably caught lung too. I mean, I destroyed his liver on the way up, and he went 30 yards and fell over.
For sure.
That buck Corey killed.
Straight liver. That's the one I'm talking about.
Yep.
Straight, dead center, straight liver. That thing ran 30 yards and fell over dead. We just went over and got him.
Yep. So I don't know. I think when a lot of guys talk about the liver hit, they're talking about either its guts. It's further back than they think. The liver sits further back than people think.
The one that stands out to me. Did you ever see? I think it was Ty Easley with Heartland Bowhunter shot a deer. It was a giant in the liver, and they kept bumping them, and it was like 2 days later.
Wow.
I think
you miss most of the liver at that point. You hit guts.
But even guts, what did they say? 6 hours?
6 to 12. Yeah. Guts are usually, if I can, is an immediate overnight for me.
Yeah. The worst part about guts is like your blood trail is going to be super limited, which stresses the point even more of like don't push them.
Yeah,
because they're going to be hurting. They're going to go lay down somewhere.
Dog or drones is what you need with a gut shot. Unless he laid in the first bed and he's there, because that's a tough find. You're gridding almost at that point. To me, livers are one that they bleed, and in fact my cousin shot one. I don't know, it was 2 years ago or something. I'll talk to him. But he shot one in the liver, and I remember he's like, I put it right through the liver. So that deer took 5 steps and just started shaking and just fell over. I mean, those livers bleed.
How's that possible? Like, how is your liver so critical to life function?
That's what filters all your blood.
On a constant recurring
basis.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's filtering all of your blood.
Oh, wow.
So
when your built-in dialysis machine.
Right. So when that opens up, you've got giant arteries coming through there.
Is that when they put people on dialysis? Is when
Kidneys.
your liver's failing? Your kidneys.
Yeah.
What do your kidneys do?
Filter your liquids and stuff out.
That you consume?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So like when you drink, it goes to your stomach and then to your kidneys?
Through your intestines.
Through your intestines to your kidneys?
Then it gets sucked into the body, which then eventually filters through your kidneys.
Okay. So the intestines absorb it. And then with solid intake, it goes to your stomach and then into your intestines.
And then also distributes into the body through your intestines like that.
Colon?
That goes through the blood. Colon is like the last
phase.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but your liver, it filters your blood. So that's a core. You need that.
And it's very vascularized.
So it's kind of like a heart, right? Because if is it... But the liver's not as like tubular as a heart, correct? It doesn't have chambers.
It doesn't have chambers, but it's very vascularized. So it has a lot of veins and arteries coming through it for filtering.
All of your blood all the time, or is it just like...
all of your blood filters through your liver.
But not every time. Not every time my heart beat, it's not coming through my liver.
There is blood being pumped through your liver.
But not all of it. Like the amount of...
No. It's just a constant... It's just like not all your blood's in your heart either. It's in your lungs, it's in your liver, it's in your...
How long does it take blood to go from your heart back to your heart?
I have no idea.
Nick? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not-
But yeah, how do you
it-
Google that?
It's constantly pumping. That's why, like, a lot of times when they have, like, if you've got like fatty blood or anything, that's what you exercise because it pumps faster through your liver filters faster.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you do it. You exercise to pump more blood through your liver to filter out the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's why your liver's so critical. That's why if you drink a lot and you've
So it
got,
filters your blood. Okay.
Yeah. But that's why when you hit it from a deer standpoint, it's so vascularized that it bleeds a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, like a lung liver hit, like quarter 2, single lung liver hit is deadly. It's as deadly as a heart hit.
And liver is going to have primarily unoxygenated blood, correct? So,
Yes.
because blood gets oxygenated
Yes.
in the lungs.
Correct.
And correct?
Correct.
And then
'Cause that's-
immediately sent out for bodily function.
most of your blood out of your liver is dark.
What about out of your heart?
Dark, mostly. It's not oxygenated.
So it goes from the heart to the lungs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So from liver to heart to lungs to
Yeah.
body.
In
to liver to
some
heart to lungs to
cycle.
body.
Yeah, I'm not an anatomy.
Well, it's interesting
Not a
'cause-
doctor.
It's interesting because you look at your bright red blood,
Lungs
is
and
gonna be
arteries.
oxygenated blood.
Yeah, arteries, which is arteries are carrying oxygenated blood. Veins are carrying non-oxygenated blood. So your
Back
veins
to
are
the liver.
dark blue.
Well, but also you have unoxygenated blood coming back into the heart directly, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that would be coming from the liver.
I don't know.
Either from
I apparently failed.
I don't
this
think the liver
class.
takes all of the blood. I think it's just like to me it seems like an eddy
all
that's
of-
set off to the side.
No,
So
all your blood is filtered at some point through.
at some
there.
point, but not every pump. I think
Every pump there is blood being filtered. It's not
for sure.
blood that's pumping out of your heart.
Here's
is
how
not
I'm
hitting
thinking
it.
about it. I think
There's some doctor squirming right now.
I think
on this
I think
podcast.
you
He's
have
like,
I think you have your system where it's like heart, lungs, body,
Mhm.
brain, heart, lungs, body, and off to the side you have the liver. That's I bet on every pump it's catching a percentage,
Mhm.
and then it stays in that eddy for a little bit, and then it gets put back into
cleanse the
circulation.
blood, take the alcohol. Cleanse the
Yeah.
blood, take the alcohol.
It's like the car wash of your
Yeah.
your vital organ
yeah.
setup,
Yeah. So, anyways, it is.
which makes sense that they would live longer than a heart hit.
Yeah. Although, man, I mean,
In
if
some
you
cases.
dead punch a heart, like I think Harlan dead punched that deer's heart, and he died like probably on his feet. But like those low heart hits and stuff, those deer can live.
Yeah,
Um,
literally live. If
yeah,
you don't cut
survive.
if you don't cut a main artery within the heart,
Nope. Especially that whatever you call it, the vertex of the heart. Yeah.
I would almost go so far as to say you might be even better to nick the liver than to nick the heart,
Probably.
because the
Mhm.
liver is so much more vascular.
Yeah. And it's funny because obviously talking about this, I know a lot of guys have talked about like the dead man space. There is no dead man space between the spinal cord and the lungs. That cavity is filled up. When those lungs are expanded, that cavity is pushed up to basically under the spine.
What
So-
about when they're not expanded?
They're still there. I mean, you're not missing in between breaths basically on that side. They're still big enough that they're just not inflated to fill the whole cavity, but like actual size wise, they're still occupying.
I
that
think there is,
space.
dude.
No, there is no dead man space. Doesn't exist.
I think I hit that deer in Kansas there, that pretty boy.
No, I think you hit him in the spine, above the spinal cord in the backstrap.
How far above? How?
Because there's backstrap, spine,
Mhm.
spinal artery, which we talked about with this deer, and then lung. And so you're either hitting spine, artery, or lung, or you're hitting backstrap and over the top. Which is, I mean, think about some of these big bucks. There's 3-4 inches of backstrap there on that top.
We should look. I've never looked really closely at the space between. So like, because when you gut a deer,
Yeah,
you know,
the gravity is pulling it, and it's all.
yeah, it's obviously a mess. But when you cut it open, you have all the digestive.
Mm-hmm.
You have guts.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have diaphragm. Right?
Yep. So liver bumps up against the
It's
diaphragm.
just literally a barrier between the liver's up in front of the diaphragm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in front of the diaphragm, you have vital organs: your heart, lungs, liver.
No, liver is behind. I'm sorry.
Liver's
I thought
behind
you
it?
meant like going.
Okay. So lungs.
Liver is behind the
Lungs and heart.
diaphragm. Lung and heart is in the cavity
It
of
sure
front.
seems like there would be a small space there between the it's not the diaphragm, but the top of the cavity.
From everything that I've seen and read, is that space is not.
Well, guys lose deer and they live.
I think it's single lung, high single lungs.
Yeah.
Case in point, my deer right now, which I think I made that sever just, I think, ate him up. But if you shoot like a 1-inch fixed blade and you put a high single lung on him, that deer lives.
So, yeah, I guess the single lung is the biggest question mark for myself and probably most people is like, can a deer live with a single lung hit? How long do they live? If not?
Mm-hmm. I think I've seen deer single lung survive often. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it depends
I know the rate
on
of recovery
much.
is not good.
No, and I mean, that's where it's like, at some point, that deer probably dies. Like, that's where it comes back is that shot fatal? Well, not in the first 96 hours. In the next 3 months, maybe.
Got to be a percentage of it, because, like, even if you nick 2 lungs, like, if the organs can still function...
If you nick
that's
2
what it comes
lungs,
down to.
The amount of blood that cavity starts to fill up quickly, and he suffocates internally.
Yeah.
The single lung thing is interesting because that buck, I think it depends on where the single lung is. So like that buck, I shot straight down close. That single lung literally was hanging out of that deer's body.
Right.
Like that deer was not going to survive. He was alive when we found him, but he was not going to survive long term. But if you think about a high single lung, like especially miss close, hit far, I bet that deer he's not going to feel great, but I bet he recovers.
Yeah.
He bleeds and eventually it clots, and I bet he survives. Does gangrene or something get him in the wintertime? Maybe. You know, that who knows? At that point, the single lung was just a contributing factor to his death.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I've seen guys literally what I thought would like punch a deer like damn good, and like that deer lives.
Yeah. Well, I think for me anyways, like that conversation kind of confirms you want to put as big a hole in that thing as you possibly can. So,
and you want it in between the heart, lungs, liver. You want it in that 12 to 18-inch box.
Yeah. Yeah. And so because from a recovery standpoint, you want a good blood trail. That's certainly important.
Mm-hmm.
But that's directly, that's indicative of what's happening inside that animal.
Sure.
You want to create as much hemorrhage as possible in as vital of organs as possible.
The more hemorrhage you create, the faster, the quicker that deer dies.
Yeah. And so I think you could almost say it's a fact that as long as it penetrates and as long as it's intact, that those 2-blade expandables, or even however many blades, 3-blade expandable.
An expandable will cut a bigger hole and do more damage.
It's a deadlier broadhead.
Yeah. I mean, people talk about the pass-through aspect. From a blood trailing standpoint, a pass-through aspect is absolutely an advantage to tracking.
Absolutely.
But a small hole in a lobe of a liver versus a large axe cut through a lobe of the liver will make a big difference from a hemorrhaging side.
Yeah. I would almost put it like, if you're deciding, I'm gonna say, well, the mechanics are not what makes a mechanical broadhead deadly. It's the cutting diameter.
Mm-hmm.
So regardless of fixed or mechanical, it's the larger the cutting diameter on those vital organs, the deadlier the broadhead.
Yep.
However, it has to meet some base level requirements.
Sure.
It has to penetrate. It has to stay intact.
Has to deploy.
Well, that's in reference to the mechanical versus fixed blade, which I don't think is as important.
I've seen some of those not pop a blade up, and that definitely has a major effect.
What do you mean? Well, yeah, because that's affecting your cutting diameter.
Mm-hmm.
So it might as well be a fixed blade or a field point even.
Yeah. I mean, and it comes back to, like, people say, like, don't do it, but, you double lung a deer with a field point, it'll kill it. Like, it'll die.
Maybe. The lungs, yeah, maybe. But, dude, your chances are not good.
No.
I don't think. I think even if you...
No, they're not good at all. I mean, even
because
it's
a
1-inch...
A field point doesn't create hemorrhage. It punctures it. And, yeah, if you puncture something like a lung that is literally filled with air and it deflates, or it's literally filled with blood, yeah, it's going to kill that deer. Not quickly.
No.
Not humanely.
No. Yeah, and it's very possible if I would have shot this deer with a fixed blade, I wouldn't have found nearly as much blood. I may not even have tracked nearly as far as I did. Or he may have even survived.
Yeah, well, so yours is a great example of, like, man, not only did the mechanical do what it should, but even bigger, right? Like, dude, anytime you pass through an animal, it's like you could have afforded a bigger cutting surface, right? Because that's what you want to achieve is with any broadhead is a pass through and with durability.
Yeah.
And so the more cut you can put on that thing and still achieve that, the better. That's a fact.
Yes.
I totally understand why guys shoot fixed blades, and in a lot of cases, they're right, and they're maybe they should be shooting that.
Well, what's interesting is I think, and I did it for a long time. I killed a ton of deer with fixed points or fixed blades. And again, I got to find that graphic, but that graphic that illustrated where deer were hit and the recovery of, like, we recovered, he was dead, we found him, he was alive, he lived, whatever. It's funny because most of us, twitch at the sound of a gut shot deer, right? But the fact is from the back of the leg to the guts, most of those deer were recovered dead. From the back of the leg up, like in that shoulder area, most of those deer were not recovered.
Yeah.
And so the fixed blade aspect is, well, I'm going to put it right through the shoulder. The reality is according to that graphic, and maybe it was because those people didn't have their arrows set up right or whatever, most of those deer were not found.
Well, dude, the shoulder blade and bones in general definitely have prevented deer from getting killed.
Yes.
And that's why that graphic is that way, I think. Because there's setups and there's broadheads, and certainly mechanicals are a big culprit of them.
Sure, you put 100 grain rage on a light arrow and you're not getting shit penetration.
Right. And so, it just comes basically down to, like, know your setup, know what it can penetrate, and also know the anatomy. Know where you're, what's a lethal shot and what's not.
Yep. Agree. Yeah, crazy, but
it's funny to see guys' reactions. I mean, that's I keep coming back to Winky, and I guess other guys too. But it's funny to watch guys' reactions when they hit deer in certain places.
Sure.
Every one of us has watched a shot on a TV show or on, like, just whatever. We've seen people shoot deer, and we're yeah. And my reaction might be like, ooh,
yeah.
And it's funny. Winky is one that stood out to me. It's like I watched him. It was maybe that big wiry 10-point that he shot standing on the field, where he hit that thing like square in the guts, or like maybe right in front of the back leg, and he turns to the camera and he's like, got him. And because he knows, he's got enough experience to say that is a dead deer. You put a deer,
you leave him enough, you don't push him, he'll die.
You put and especially, and so I think Winky at the time was shooting his rocket broadheads, expandable broadheads. He knows that you hemorrhage a vital organ, even an intestine, whatever's back in that deer will die.
Yeah.
And if you have the acreage to, be able to recover him, and you have the time, you can back off, and hopefully your weather conditions are right that you can still salvage every part of the animal. He will die.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a disadvantage for a lot of us, is like, we don't have the acreage, or, you're out of room, or whatever it is,
It's just hard. I mean, just looking for, if your property is a premium big buck property, like, your habitat is good.
Sure.
He's going to be hard to recover.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine a giant switchgrass field, like, holy cow, or a couple hundred acre cornfields.
It's where those drones really pay off, man. And I get it. Maybe there's a chance that people don't want me on the property because it's peak rut and they don't want me gridding out there. I don't blame them. It's I don't hold it. Let me put it this way. I don't hold it against any of the landowners who haven't got back to me or given me access. Some might just be unfamiliar with hunting and, like, I don't know, this guy's trying to rake the system, and other people are just like, oh, well, if he ran that far, like, he's still alive. Like, who knows? So, I don't hold them accountable for any of that, but I do think it's interesting. We had a pretty long discussion the other day about harvest numbers, and
we should talk about that a little bit.
The HUNTR Podcast is brought to you by Muddy and Stealth Cam trail cameras.
Cell cams. What an evolution the industry has seen, and we've experienced personally over the past 5, 10, whenever cameras were invented, right? It's like, man, it's totally changed the way that we inventory deer, pattern deer, and ultimately the decisions that we make when we're going out to hunt. They're a serious piece of the puzzle, and that information is invaluable for us. We trust the Muddy and Stealth cams, together to be able to collect any of that information.
Yeah, I mean, as an admitted trail cam addict, I've definitely been guilty of underhunting places or relying too heavily on that information that's come in. That said, it's an invaluable tool to the overall management plan and strategy that I have for my own properties or even hunting public land. It doesn't matter. We have a finite amount of time in going out and hunting. So when you and I are after a particular class or quality of deer, usually a mature buck, we can't waste time hunting an area where that deer doesn't exist. And those cell cams provide that information that allow us to spend the time in the area with the highest chance to accomplish our goals.
Say it all the time, man. You can't kill them if they're not there.
That's it.
So right now, any of our listeners can use code HUNTR20 to get 20% off either Muddy or Stealth cameras. We're certainly going to be taking advantage of that, and we hope you guys do too.
Yep, check out Stealth Cam and Muddy. So
we're talking about deer numbers.
Oh yeah. So by obviously this isn't my plan, but by law I could have went out and hunted this morning and shot another buck, and effectively 2 bucks would have died, right? If drone,
if
I actually did a shot, yeah. If I actually
that's confidence right there. If I hunted this morning, a buck would have died.
If I actually see another deer on my property now. But if I was able to use drones and stuff, I likely would have recovered that deer, which means
you'd have been done.
In theory, the other buck would have lived because I didn't hunt.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect statistic of what Yoder was telling us last week of like the percentage that they don't find is way higher.
Sure.
Than the ones that they do find.
Yes.
So those people keep hunting.
Yes.
And likely they're dead deer.
Yep. Eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lethal hit at some point in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, that deer succumbs to its injuries, whether it's because of infection or whatever else happens. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a weird thing when you kind of look at that because, you know, when you look at, especially when you have somebody like Yoder who's out there seeing and looking for deer, or Tyler at Skyhound, the bottom line is like there's a lot of people calling, including myself, looking for assistance to find those deer. There's also probably 10 times as many that aren't calling.
Sure.
And just don't find the deer and then go out there and try to hunt or shoot another one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, you know, begs the question, like how many deer are really getting shot every year, because the numbers that you see, first of all, are usually an estimate anyways, but they don't include the ones that got away.
It's funny. It'd be funny to speculate. I mean, not funny is maybe not the right word, but
a lot.
I bet it's a
double.
lot. Maybe almost double. I don't know if it's quite double.
I mean, that would be like everybody that shot one also shot another one.
And it's not going to be every person, but let's say half of the people shot.
Well, how many chances you get? Like, there's a good chance I won't get a chance at another buck in Pennsylvania this year. So Nick shoots a buck in Pennsylvania. He's counted toward the harvest. I'm not in the harvest number, but I also shot one that I didn't recover.
I'd love to know the success rate of guys that shot at deer.
Because, I mean, if you think about it.
Is it 1 in 3?
Let's just say, what was it, 400,000 400,000 deer in Ohio killed? Something like that?
Yeah.
And how many deer hunters are in Ohio?
I don't know.
Isn't it like 350? Is it more than one deer per guy getting killed?
I'm sure it is.
That's intriguing. Because like in Pennsylvania, I think it's like 400,000, but there's 750,000 hunters. So it's like half a deer per guy.
Are you saying just bucks? Or?
No, I'm just saying deer total.
Also, because Ohio's a 6 deer state. So,
so
one guy can shoot 6 deer.
Yeah, but only one buck.
One antlered buck.
All right. So
and not all in one county.
Yep. So let's do those numbers. So Ohio 22 deer harvest. Okay. Oh, no, it's not nearly that much. So in 2022 there were 211,000 deer checked in.
Across all seasons.
Mm-hmm. Across all seasons. I was trying to see how many, and there were 410,000 permits purchased.
Wow.
So it's basically a half a deer per hunter, right?
Yeah. Or half the hunter shot one deer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
Makes a little more sense.
Yes. Yep. Half the hunter shot one deer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with that in mind, then
that's crazy. Well, that I think shines light on incentive. And we talk about how do we get people to kill more deer, because in some cases we need, especially the doe harvest needs to come up.
Yeah.
It's a 6 deer state right now, and only half the guys are shooting one deer.
Yeah. Yep. And half of those deer that were killed during archery season.
Okay.
And then about 12,000 less in the normal gun seasons. Then about 13,000 in muzzleloader, 9,500 in youth, and 1,000 in controlled firearm hunts.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to figure out, okay, if there's 210,000 deer or 211,000 deer killed,
how many were shot at?
Probably another 100,000.
500,000. No, it's just a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, and how many of those deer end up succumbing? I mean, you think about, finding dead heads or dead does or whatever in the woods. I mean, a lot, So yeah, especially as we start to talk about like how effective is the hunting community at killing deer, you kind of have to figure out some sort of factor around the wounding rate and eventual those deer succumbing to their injuries. That doesn't seem like it's talked about very often.
Well, it's really hard, I think, to know.
Sure.
I don't know how you retrieve that statistic, but it would be really interesting to know, like run down the line of like trad bows, compound bows, crossbows, shotguns, rifles,
muzzleloader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what's the percentage of?
I think it's pretty easy. It's like,
kill.
Did you hunt with any of these weapons? No, yes, no, whatever. And then, did you harvest a deer with any of these weapons? You answer that. Did you hit and not recover a deer with any of these weapons? If you did that in a blind pool, I think, and not everybody's going to be honest about it, but...
Yeah, and then how many?
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's a lot of people that will say, gun, bow, whatever, like they missed, but they really hit the deer. Especially with guns. Like, they walk up, there's no blood, I missed them.
Sure. Well, it's like it goes both ways because it's like on one end of the spectrum with like the most primitive equipment, I think that the wounding rate is fairly high. I think we all know guys that with trad bows that like
it's a tough thing to kill a deer with.
Yeah, it's not as lethal of a weapon as maybe something more in the middle, like a compound bow, a crossbow, or even a close range firearm.
Yeah.
So you have a high wounding rate probably, but and it goes both ways because you have the guys using that equipment
are very serious.
Yeah, and maybe at some point achieve a level of lethality, but it's just a less lethal weapon, because it's, and then on the opposite spectrum, you have a long range rifle.
Yeah, straight wall cartridge.
Where it's like, it's an extremely effective killing tool. But, the yardage and stuff in between, and also the lack of hemorrhage, that an arrow produces, whether bow, crossbow, or trad bow. So I think that there's a greater chance for uncertainty, like on the hit. It just, first of all, I didn't see where I hit because it was 200 yards away. I don't know. I think it was a good shot. It felt good.
Yeah.
But then you don't have an arrow to read. And you basically you're not going to have as much blood in most cases.
Yeah, you don't see blood unless you drop them. You don't see blood right at that point of impact.
So there's disadvantages of that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. It definitely is. It's a number that's not discussed a lot, and as more and more data come in from guys like Mike and his group, like obviously, starts to paint a picture of like there's quite a bit of deer that get away.
There also is the element of what would be the name for it, like a pseudo confidence in your weapon.
Sure.
So if I have a gun and I see a deer at 100 yards, I'm taking the shot.
No brainer.
That's why you hear.
Yeah.
And just shots ringing
volleys,
out because guys are just flinging lead at people or at deer rather. And
where are we at? Cleveland.
And I think that's also. It's on a scale. So I think, the crossbow would be, shot, let's say guns are guns. Walking up to crossbows, I think, guys with crossbows have more of that feeling than, let's say, a compound or a traditional bow.
Yeah.
Like, you get down to a compound and a traditional weapon, you understand that
there's a threshold
there's
there.
A very low chance of getting a second shot. You know what I mean? So you try to wait for the right moment.
Yeah.
The crossbow's kind of the in-betweener where it's like, and granted, maybe I don't know enough about how quickly you can reload those things.
Not that quick. Like, I don't think people are thinking about a volley. I think the confidence would be...
Yeah, you're still on that side
I've got a 3 to 9, variable scope.
Yeah, it's more about distance. And,
it's more of an overconfidence in the distance than it is a follow-up shot.
Sure. Sure, I would agree with that.
And you do have a bolt to go and look for, blood or whatever, unless it's sticking. The longer the shot, the more likely you don't have that bolt. The more likely it's going to be sticking in the animal because you're going to be losing momentum at distances.
Maybe it's a little harder to find. It's half the length.
Yeah. I mean, the boys have shot several of them, and we've never had an issue with them. I mean, we don't shoot past 30 yards, but we've never had an issue with them.
Sure.
Finding the bolts at least. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing there from a confidence level, and like I said, I mean, I just did it, but everybody makes mistakes. Like, shit happens. But there's obviously a certain group of people that will make a valiant effort to find it. There'll be another group of people that not putting them down. They just don't know, and they're just like, well, no blood. I guess I missed them.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I would assume if you could gather all those statistics, it would be a bell curve. On one end of the weaponry, you have, your trad bow guys. Maybe, how would I say that? The rate of wounding deer is higher, even though they're putting,
not because of them, but because of the weapon.
Yeah, a maximum effort into recovering the deer, into making the right shot. And maybe on the other spectrum, with a gun, it's like you don't have as much information and you also have, further, more opportunities. So I would argue at the end of the day, like, maybe the odds of success are about the same.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, I'm just speculating, but it's for different reasons. But it seems like ultimately the odds of successfully recovering and killing the animal would be about the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. The wounding thing is for sure. It's something that nobody really discusses, and it's probably a big issue. It's probably a bigger issue than most people think.
Well, it's not pretty. I mean, it's not one that you want like a non-hunting community necessarily like pointing at, because it definitely is it's an uglier side of hunting, is like there's opportunity for wounding.
Sure.
And none of us want that. I mean, that's why you practice with your equipment. That's why you try to use the most lethal equipment possible. But it's hunting. It does happen.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I mean, to their argument, that's why a lot of the crossbow guys say we should be using crossbows in archery, because they're a more efficient killing machine.
Yes, but because of like what we kind of just ran through, I think they also have potential negatives. The overconfidence in those long distance shots being the main one, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would also. I know I've talked to a couple of them. It's funny because we get in the crossbow discussion, and it's cool to see. There are definitely some hunters out there that I have conversations with, and I'm like, this guy gets it, and he's putting in he's doing things the way I would do things on my compound. Like, they're building their bolts correctly. They're doing things. Like, when you start talking about some of these crossbows that are shooting 400 feet per second, I would bet that most people don't have their bolts set up correctly to be lethal at that speed. In fact, they're probably about to blow up coming off of that freaking crossbow.
Well, I think the fact that the bolts are shorter accommodates for a lot of that.
It does. But I mean, when you think
about, if you tried to shoot an arrow as long as ours, it would have to be like a 25 spine.
Yeah.
Like, it would have to be
stiff. When you shoot that fast, though, and let's say, because I would say most people are probably using 100 grain broadhead on a crossbow.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's a lot of speed coming out with probably, and I say this lightly because I know I've talked to several people. There are some people that are building their arrows with FOC in mind and stuff, but most are not.
I wonder what can be achieved as far as like if I wanted to build my crossbow bolt for maximum.
So I built one for the kids.
You'd want to make it as heavy as possible, right?
I built one for the kids that, I mean, it's only 22 inches, I think, is the bolt.
I don't know.
I think that's what it is. And but I've got a weighted brass insert in the front because I'm shooting 100 grain broadhead. I've got
what is the bolt like? Is it a grains per inch? Like how?
Yep.
How stiff is it? Like, what's the spine?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it's 22-inch arrows, so it's, I assume, stiff.
Right.
Like,
well, it's inherently stiff because it's short. But like, what is it actually spined at? Because you don't know.
I don't know. Let me see if I have it on here.
I assume it probably doubles. You know what I mean? So it's like if I'm shooting a 250 on a 31-inch arrow, if I back it down to like 22 inches, it's probably pushing like 100 spine or whatever. That I don't know what that chart equals out to.
I'll tell you in 1 second on these ones.
Do you know total bolt weight, like what your kid's setup is?
No, I do not. I've not looked at that.
Because you'd think at that speed, it's like, man, you could probably easily get away with like an 800 grain bolt. I just don't know how you would build that much weight into it.
So, and again,
Unless it's a solid piece
I won't,
of like
I won't call
steel.
the brand out because it's just, I bought them. Okay, here we go. So yeah, I'm shooting 22 grain.
Oh.
Yes, I'm shooting 22 grain or 22 inch bolts at a thousandth. Yeah, a thousandth inch straightness, so 0.001. They have a 92 grain brass insert in the front. They do not list anything around spines.
Okay. What's your grains per inch on your bolt?
9.1.
Okay.
Yep, 9.1 on a 22 with a 92 grain insert.
Got it. 100 grain broadhead.
And 18 grains of veins.
Okay.
That's it.
That's 410. So you get 992 grain outsert, 100 grain broadhead, 9.1 times 22. Whatever. That's your shaft weight, and then 18 grains.
Yep.
And
so
then
there you go.
A knock maybe.
So
So you're like 415 or something.
415. Yep. That'd be it.
So 450. So and at 400 feet per second, if that is really what it's flying, like man, it seems like it should be probably way heavier. Probably should be like 600 grains.
I don't know how you can make it that heavy.
I don't know either.
Yeah, because I could go heavier broadhead. I bet that still has.
heavier broadhead would be a no-brainer.
I would assume that still has a pretty strong FOC percentage on it.
Sure.
With 192 grains up front, basically on a 410 grain, it's probably 20% or damn close, 19 to 20%.
Okay.
I don't. Well, I need the fulcrum point to calculate that, and I don't have it. But yeah, I bet it's let's say it's north of 17% on FOC. So, and those things, the kids have been lethal with them. So I guess I kind of built them as not as heavy as I could, but I built them with some sort of FOC in mind and heavier up front. But obviously 410 grains is not a very heavy arrow or bolt at all.
I say it's probably heavier than a lot of guys' bolts,
Let me-
but relative to the speed that the thing is producing, like that's where I'm saying it could be heavier.
I'll tell you this though, the Raven ones that came with the original bow that I got for the kids were 8.9 grains. They were 21 inch bolts, no insert, and 100 grains up front. They were like 310 grain bolts.
Yeah, well, and truthfully, that's been kind of the standard in the archery industry for a long time too, as we evolve out of like this speed era where in the early 2000s or whatever, it was just all about speed. And then that's where you see guys like, who are your classics? Like your bone collectors, your the Kiskis, even the Lakoskis at one point. Everybody's shooting like the Maxima Reds, Maxima Blues, 350s, and those were whatever per inch. Their total arrow setups were probably like 350, and they were shooting like 65 or 70 pounds.
Yeah.
And they were ripping out of there. They're shooting like 330 feet per second, but they're just like, bouncing off these deer.
Yeah, it just stops like a freight train dead.
Yeah. And,
yep.
So, fortunately, I think we understand a lot more about arrows and those setups and stuff than we ever, I think we're just at a good point with that, where guys have the ability to build super deadly arrows that penetrate, that are straight shooting, regardless of if it's from a compound or a crossbow or a trad bow. It's like the technology exists. We can make super lethal arrows that penetrate.
Yeah. No, the information's out there, and that crossbow bolt that I made for the kids, it was pretty standard out of the box. Like, it was like, here are my options, pick. I knew what I was putting on the front. Maybe I go to 125 grain broadhead just to give it a little bit more oomph up front, but those things have been killers.
I feel like everybody should be shooting a heavier broadhead, just about.
Sure.
Like the reason that we landed on a number that was reasonable and guys just like accepted it, but like I don't see any downfall to shooting a heavier broadhead.
I love that 125 grain sever setup. It like I said, I lose maybe a little bit of speed off my bow, but the force at impact is substantial.
Yeah. Well, and the further forward you have it too, I think the better. Truthfully, if I could shoot 150 grain, and even if I had to sacrifice 25 grains off of the tail end of my insert system, I think that would be an advantage.
Absolutely.
The further forward I can get it, the better penetration I'm going to have with it.
It's the dart thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, fill a dart, like it's complete light in the back end, and it's so heavy up on front.
There's also only so much weight that you can build into an object. Like, it still has to function. It still has to do its thing. So
yeah. Well, let's wrap up this way. So
I'm not ready to be done. What time is it? We got time.
I don't know. You're going to Illinois.
It's fine, dude. We're good.
Okay.
I want to talk about Kansas a little bit.
That's what I was going into.
Yeah.
So you're leaving today. This was kind of, you made your decision when we were at Illinois, basically, that you were coming back to Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still had some months, but it was kind of like, hey, I'm coming back.
Coming back.
So you're gonna go to Illinois today. You're gonna hunt. Well, tomorrow looks really shitty. It's gonna be hot.
Yeah. So today's Tuesday. So I'm gonna drive out today. I'll get in tonight, like later tonight. Tomorrow, it's like the highest day. So it's like temperatures climbing, and then tomorrow night, it's supposed to kind of just tank off. There's no precipitation that's coming with it.
It's just a weak front.
It's just a weak front, but it's going to drop. I mean, it's not going to be cold, but it's
40s and 50s.
It'll be a significant change.
40s in the morning, high 50s in the afternoon.
So I'm kind of up in the air. I mean, it seems like the most important thing that I can do is get a stand hung in this spot that we're getting these bucks.
Where I killed mine at.
Yeah, and so I think the question is, do I... I'll be there in time to hunt Wednesday, but should I? Even though I have a super limited time frame.
It's going to be almost 70 degrees in the morning.
Because all I have is Thursday, Friday. So, I'm almost tempted to just, I don't know, sleep in a little bit, get coffee and stuff Wednesday, head over to that spot mid to late morning, go hang the stand. I have a pulse on everything. I'll make sure it's good. So I'm taking a lone wolf custom gear is what I'm going to hang. And it's good, clean, easy access. I can feel good about going in and hanging it and then getting out. And then I have to make a decision that evening. Like, do I go back and hunt it that evening? It's going to be hot still. Do I just wait for the next morning? Because then Thursday, Friday is like your good weather day. So I've got 4 good weather hunts.
Yeah, Thursday morning, Thursday
So
evening,
I want to make
Friday
the
morning,
most of my
Friday
time without, boogering a spot unnecessarily by hunting it with the wrong weather conditions.
Yeah. No, I mean, that seems
But it's
like,
also November 8th. So
I
it's
know.
like, do I just hunt?
And I mean, those deer have been all over that place.
Yeah.
So,
We had a new shooter show up the other day. What are we calling him?
Which one?
Crazy Horse.
Crazy Horse. Yeah. That deer's bigger than we think.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Antler-wise, he's just kind of weird.
So,
it's a horse.
What was cool for me is because I even told you yesterday, I was like, boy, I don't know. I was like, in some cases he looks 4. In other cases, I'm like, maybe he's ancient. So to see him next to that split G2 buck yesterday, I was like, oh.
Yeah. Horse.
Ooh.
Yeah. Giant. Yeah. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, so you've got that. And then Friday is the kickoff to our annual Kansas deer camp.
Yeah.
So I will be taking both dads. It's like I got suited up for the Meals on Wheels truck or something here.
Well, dude, this was a lot. This was not like, it's not easy to make a second trip like this happen. Like, things kind of keep moving, and it's like I've got dogs to take care of. I've got a wife that needs to like see me at some point. We need to still coordinate on how to sync up with this stuff. So in order for this to work out for me, I had to figure out is the wife going to allow it? Which I knew would be a yes. Is logistically what do I do with the dogs? Because Margie's out of town. She's kind of doing her own thing and stuff. So I had to figure the dogs out, and then I had to also get Dad to Kansas and me meet up with you so that we could go finish that off. So
yes.
And I also had to change vehicles so that would make sense. So like this past couple days, I went to the farm, hunted twice, swapped vehicles with my dad. So I have the truck, left the dogs with them. So they're watching them for me for the week. And so now I've got Dad's truck all loaded up. So I came back last night, did all the wash, got everything squared up, packed as much as I could. We're going to break down and take some of this podcast stuff with us. So I'm driving back to Illinois, staying with a good a friend that I haven't met in person yet, but that reached out and was like, "Hey,
is Paul going to be there?"
No,
they won the football
game the other day. Yeah, so I'm staying
with his dad.
He's got a camp with his dad and his kid, and one of his friends, Brian. Sounds like Brian shot one the other day, so I don't know if he'll still be there or not. But so yeah, I'm just crashing with those guys.
That'll be fun
for 2 days, and then Saturday, I guess sometimes Friday night or Saturday morning, depending on if I shoot a deer that day or something. I'll make
early. So we'll be in Kansas City around between 4 and 6 a.m. on Saturday morning.
Yeah, so it'll be that night that I drive down there.
Yeah.
Even if I kill one, I'll just drive down there and
sleep in the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll go to Walmart, get our shopping done, and then we'll be in Kansas. And then really the first day in Kansas is going to be like setup day, although that's some of the better
Best
weather day.
I think we need to get in there.
Maybe this weather will change. It had been pretty solid of like high 30s, low 40s in the morning, high 50s, low 60s in the afternoon. Quickly, it's now become like high 60s, low 70s, which I hate.
It's a warm rut for sure. Which we kind of knew was coming after
it always
October.
happens in frickin' Kansas too. We get these warm spells, it's like 70 degrees, and we're just toasting ourselves out there.
Yeah.
So, but we don't know the date yet, Nick, but we are going to try to do a podcast live with the dads at Kansas Deer Camp. I think the first one went over well enough. We're decided to do it again. So we got to make sure that the internet connection is suitable out there.
Well, we're gonna have to figure out how to rig a camera to get all 4 of us too. That's gonna be the hard part.
We'll probably just have to throw the computer up higher to view us. It may not be as well. It wasn't clear anyways. Like our video footage sucked.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, but that will probably be the best way to do it. And we're just gonna have a discussion, talk about camp. I would assume we do it. I don't know. Earlier or later in the trip? I don't know. Not sure.
We'll figure it out.
Between
now and then.
The later in the trip we get, the more rut worn we look.
It will have already aired by the time you're seeing this. So
Sure. Yeah. So
we'll put something on social.
But at worst comes to worst, we'll record it, send it to Nick. Nick can get it up.
That's the benefit of subscribing to our YouTube channels. You'll get a notification when we go live. So there you go. If you needed a reason.
Yep. So it should be fun. We always have a blast at Kansas Deer Camp. The exciting part is we're going in blind. We don't know what we're into. Like, we know where we're hunting because we have the same spots, but we don't know any of the deer. We have no cameras. We have nothing running. We don't know anything.
Yeah, looking for some redemption too. I mean, not to bring it back up, but better now than when we were with them. So like last year, in the spirit of transparency, we shot at, and I'll exclude myself from that because I didn't shoot at any of them, but we shot at 4 deer and we killed one of them.
Yes.
Recovered one of them.
Killed one on the first evening. Right? Was it first evening?
One of the first evenings, yeah. If not the first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2 of those were my dad, and one of them was your dad.
Yep.
And I guess we don't know at the end of the day if those deer died or, we certainly put in our best.
Back to the wounding discussion.
Our best effort to recover them, but I mean, it's one of them deals where it's like, you try to prepare somebody for the Midwest and, in something like Kansas that's only ever hunted Pennsylvania and even Ohio. It's like, there's no way to put yourself in the situation. It's like there's a big 5-year-old Kansas buck walking at you.
Those deer are so tough too, and I mean it. I think they'll be ready. I mean it. Like I said, it's a blast, and they've got a little bit of experience around it now. It's just getting in the right setup. Maybe a little pressure off too, in that like we don't know what deer are there, so it's kind of like, hey,
cameras, first going.
First deer you see that you're happy with, kill it.
You want to talk even a little bit about like we've been with your dad, trying to, and this for the, per the crossbow conversation. It's like we're, I think you and I would be in favor of like to your dad. We've both told him like, dude, here I'll give some context. So where this started was like, so your dad got cancer a couple of years ago, right? And so like it's affected him, seriously.
Yeah. And
but so he's cancer free now, right?
Still there, just under control
for the most part. So it's not actively growing. So that's affected his ability to climb into a tree stand.
Yes, dramatically,
pretty significantly. So so he's asking you like, hey, what's my tree stand setup look like? I don't know if I can climb a hang on stand. I think I need to do a ladder stand. But he's still like, can I climb the ladder stand? Like, and we're like, I don't know, dude. Like.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer for me. I was like, dude, sit a ground blind. Like, we'll put you over a decoy. I've got a great spot
for that.
Which
is easy, except for the fact that because like I know it like the chemo and stuff's really affected his joints and his muscles and stuff, is that I don't know if he could draw his bow sitting down.
Exactly. So it started with the tree stand conversation. We're like, well, okay, if
I'm gonna bring a ladder stand. That is the initial plan right now. Is I'm gonna hang a ladder stand for him.
Okay. And if that doesn't work or whatever, it's like, okay, well, let's transition to a ground blind. I think that makes sense. The discussion then is he's like, well, I don't know if I can draw my bow sitting like that. And it's like, okay, well, if it has to be a ground blind, then it sounds like it might also have to be a crossbow. Like, dude, shoot a crossbow.
Yeah, which he won't.
And he doesn't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
the cancer has not affected his brain.
Yeah, Yeah.
So
he just don't want to give it up.
Yeah.
Yet, and
and I get it. I mean, it literally is the point in everyone's life where at some point you're like, I can't shoot this compound anymore. I either don't hunt or I shoot a crossbow, which is what it's there for. So I don't know.
it's kind of like driving a truck. It's like, man, there does reach a point where it's like maybe you shouldn't have a driver's license anymore.
Yeah. I mean, very, very high chance that it will be in the back of my truck for Kansas.
The crossbow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To have.
You gonna bring a ground blind?
Yep.
Probably not a bad move.
Yep. I'll have one.
I'd fully in support of that tactic for your dad. I think a ground blind with a crossbow is maybe. I mean, I think it'll be enjoyable for him. Although, blinds just are not as enjoyable
as tree stand.
I
think he'll be fine in the ladder stand. I just have to visualize kind of where it's going to go, and a ladder stand inherently is a bigger pain in the ass to set up right away.
Oh, definitely.
But I think we can get a ladder stand up, and I think he'll be comfortable in the ladder stand.
Check this out. This is really cool. Jed texted me the other day, and because I'm this 4-year-old's been running all over that farm. So, dude, we got to get Silas. He's walking the line, I guess, kind of like you are. His son's like not losing interest, but it's just kind of like, eh.
I know Carter's kind of. I mean, I've seen Taste. His friend was talking about he almost got a shot at a really nice 8-point with the crossbow the other day because they're both in 6th grade.
Yeah,
and I saw a little bit of it kick back on him. And I was like, all right, dude. I was like, when you want to go? I'm like, just let me know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And Silas is hunting with a crossbow and has only ever hunted out of blinds. And I don't know that I ever fully knew that.
Carter's hunted out of a tree stand maybe once or twice. It's just hard with 2 people.
I know. Well, and so and I was like, dude, that buck is at that tree stand. Like, that's where you guys need to be. And he's like, well, Silas has never hunted out of a tree stand. Like, how would we even do that? I was like, well, you would just hang a stand next to him. And he's like, I never thought of that.
Sure.
Right? So because
which I haven't either.
Hunted out of blinds.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they did that the other night.
Oh, did they?
And he's like, dude, Silas has like a whole new outlook on hunting. He's like, that was amazing. He's right, dude.
It's just the auditory and your senses are
plain and simple, dude. Hunting out of blinds sucks. Like
it
literally it takes you way out of the element.
Yeah.
And it's like you're only experiencing a small amount of like, actually being in the woods.
Yeah.
Yes, they are pivotal for some situations, and like they'll put you where you need to be, and so like they're a tool.
Mm-hmm.
But I was super excited to hear him say, he's like, dude, Silas is excited about hunting again. He just wants to hunt from tree stands.
Yeah, and that's my hopeful move here, and I'm not pushing him. Like, whether we do it, we'll try to probably pull it off this week one day. I'm going to try to get him out. If not, when we come back from Kansas, we have like 3 or 4 days that we're going to be hunting in Kentucky. And so I'll for sure pull it off there because I don't really have any blinds set up.
Yeah, and a ladder stand's a great,
absolutely,
deal for that. I think ladder stands are great, especially for big gnarly trees.
Yeah,
that you can't get a hang on in. I mean, that for me, that's what they're for.
I love them. I mean, I prefer a lock on personally, but from a standpoint of stability and just being in there, like I've killed plenty of deer out of ladder stands, and I had some of those like I don't know, they're like the Hawk or Big Game 1.5s, and like with Harlan or Carter, both of us could fit in there. 2 of us could fit in there.
Yeah.
But now we're getting to the point where they're getting bigger and I'm getting fatter, so it just doesn't help.
Right.
So yeah, I need to figure out something to where he's not also feeling like flustered and that I'm not right there to help him, because they're still young. So, but they've both sat in the last year a couple ladder sits, and I think they were like, whoa, like this is,
I know.
like that deer's looking right at me. Like I can't move.
Yeah.
And they've learned the lesson hard. I know Harlan got busted by some does because, he kind of, the little things he could get away with in a blind, he was trying to do in the ladder. And I was like, dude, they aren't going to tolerate that.
Nope.
But yeah, I like that. And so my hope is the ladder stand situation works out with my dad. I'll have 2 actually. I'll have that kind of a run and gun ladder stand, and then I'll have like a traditional big game if I've got to build that sumbitch and put it up. I'm kind of
wait, what? A run and gun ladder stand?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
It's a Novix.
Okay.
It's called a Raider ladder stand.
Okay.
It's like 42 pounds.
And how does that work?
So it's a normal ladder stand section, right? And then it's got quick adapters to build the stick or the ladder for it. But it's a backpack. Like I could put a 40-pound tree stand on my back.
No way.
Stack it, run in there, put it together, throw it up on the tree.
Oh, that's
and,
awesome.
Like ready to roll.
That's awesome.
That's why I bought it for him.
Cool.
Yeah, nobody else really makes one that's like a run and gun ladder.
This trip's all about, you can only pack so much in the truck or whatever. I did the espresso machines in the truck.
Of course it is.
By the way. Oh, yeah, I'm not leaving without it. I also put a pull saw in there, a full-size pull saw. And that was one of those things where I was like, it's awkward, but man, if we, especially for your dad's ladder stand, I was like, if we end up hanging a stand earlier in the week or like it absolutely needs it, then I would rather have it.
Yeah, I mean, because we don't know what we're getting into, it's more of a run and gun for you and I, and just getting the dad. I think we know where your dad's going. Probably same spot as last year.
Yeah.
Along
with one of us probably.
Yeah. My goal is just try to get them situated in like a good spot, and then I'll figure it out from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we have options. I mean, we spent enough time there. Like even spots that have dried up in the past, like, I don't know.
It's the rut,
If we get time, like I'd run into the ants and just go look.
It's the rut, deer in there. It's just, figuring out. So yeah, it should be cool. Hopefully we get them in a good situation where they've got a shot at it. And
dude, just total pivot here. I saw a giant buck the other day. I didn't really catch it up in Ohio.
Oh, the one you were sitting.
Yeah.
And you don't recognize that deer?
No.
You recognize the other deer that were with him, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
At least I could speculate. Yeah, so
big 9-point is what you said?
Big 9-point. Yeah, because I saw a big 4 on his right side. Mm-hmm. So I was hunting a grassy knoll basically. So
yep.
It's one of those situations where I saw him out there. It was just like, it was classic rut. It's like, there's 2 or 3 bucks, one of them for sure a shooter, with some other 2 and 3-year-olds and stuff, with kind of a horde of does. And they're just running circles around each other. And the buck's he's just standing his ground. Like, I can tell who's the dominant there.
Yeah.
So that's where I threw the kitchen sink at him. I mean, he was 400 yards, and I'm just rattling my balls off, and just like the loudest snort wheeze you've ever heard. I said it sounded like I was letting air out of a bouncy house. And he heard it. He heard every one of them.
He just didn't give a shit.
There was no, you're not going to pull him off the tail to come catch the horn,
Mm-mm.
So
it's a pretty good saying.
Yeah, he just wasn't coming.
You'd have to question him if you did.
Yeah. So I did. Did I tell you what happened with that? Did I tell you afterwards? So my plan was, I
know you got down to go and like make a move on them.
Yeah. So they'd cut the beans the night before. So it's like I had a freshly picked bean field, and I saw where they all went down into. And so my plan was just to walk clear across the field, get to the fence line, because it's the property line. And I was like, I'll just walk it down, and I'll see if there's any trees down there that make sense. My thought being that those does are going to probably come back up into the bean field at night and bring those does with them, bucks with them. And so I did, went and picked a tree, thought it was going to work. And my plan was to put that decoy out in the field and just kind of, because it's a big, giant field. So I went back to the house, pulled that pond, that water hole camera on the way back, and checked it. And that the only other shooter in there that I knew of was on the pond 25 minutes after I got down, maybe 10 minutes before I pulled the camera.
He wasn't in that group.
So he wasn't in that group. So I'm like, that confirmed. I was like, yeah, it's definitely a different deer. And so I went back to the house, changed, and I just kind of lightened my load a bit or whatever through the... Whoa. You all right?
Yeah. Wow, how much time did you take?
I'm not sure why that's so funny.
Yeah. It's just
I just dropped some stuff off.
It's just getting late in the rut here. Getting a little bit worn out.
And so whatever I did there.
Yeah, whatever. I don't need to know about it.
My plan was to just drive my truck right back to that spot. So, because I was like, man, they went down in there. It was earlier in the morning too, so I was like,
that one bottom they would have dropped down into?
Yep. And so, honestly, I had a decision. I was like, I could drive back through a lot of the property the way that I drove out, which I only did that to pull that camera in, because why not?
Yeah.
Or I just go up the normal driveway. There's like a right of way up into this property. I was like, that makes sense.
Yep.
I think that's where I messed up. Like, I drove back up that right of way, and sure enough, I see deer scattering. And I'll be honest with you, it got kind of Western a little bit. Like I'm driving up and I see and I know that these bucks, and I was like, this whole herd of deer kind of went down in here. I see the one running off. I have my big binos to throw them up. I see, okay, it's a buck. So I just kind of keep going, and I get up, and eventually I see the big buck, not far from me, 50 yards off the road. Like, and he's so I'm like, he might have been up already. It's possible it was the one that I saw run, but I don't know. I threw binos and I got a decent look at him. I'm like, that's him.
Yeah,
Gig's up at that point. So I'm like, I'm not gonna sneak past him or anything. I see him kind of run up and over the hill, so I floor it. Then reminded, this is an old, it's a well road, all rutted up and stuff, and I'm in my 4Runner. I rip it up and around him. I'm like, I'm gonna get a look at this thing. I want to see what he is, and I get ahead of him and I cut him off. Okay, and I'm right at the Ramsey house now, and I see him standing there up in the day, broad daylight. Honestly, when he turned and ran, like his frame didn't look as big to me.
Yeah,
but I still don't know exactly what he was, to be honest. It was over at that point. I was like, there's no more setting up on this. All the deer ran off and stuff. So I was like, well, that was it for that night. So I don't know exactly what that deer was. That situation's probably, it's not worth going back and hanging that stand unless I knew they were kind of down in there. But I did find you said a giant rub I posted to Instagram. Oh, yeah. It's right there. It's like that Ramsey house. It comes up in that valley. It's a historic rub. I remember I've put a camera on there before, and I've gotten Duke on there, and like
I just keep crushing.
So I'm missing something coming up there. I mean,
it's a lot of ground to cover, man, and especially this time of year, those bucks push from one patch to the next, and you just never know what's going to show up.
It's hard, man. It's wild to compare even my Ohio farm, even though I've said they're somewhat similar. In this way, they're really different. To compare my Ohio farm to our Illinois farm, it's like there's no question where the spots are at in Illinois. It's like, dude, when we get bucks on camera, I get them on 3 cameras, and there's 2 spots where we could have killed them.
They just keep making the same loop. We know what loop they're running.
In Ohio, it's like, dude, even after 6-7 years of hunting that place, it's like we still really struggle to find, like, where are those spots that, you're going to kill a majority of the buck, like your rut spots, It's challenge. It's just really tough. There just aren't as many of them. The way that the topography lays and stuff is just really, it's really kind of random.
Which is odd. I mean, because we have 140 acres in Illinois, and it, like, you going in, leaving tonight, like, I'm very confident you're going to encounter one of those bucks this week. Yeah. Like, very confident.
Yeah, no pressure.
No pressure. But, I mean, it just seems like the way that those deer make those loops, that as long as you don't get winded, you're in, you said one of those spots.
Should be in good shape.
Should be in good shape.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But, yeah, I mean, it'll be,
I'm waiting for this rut stash to give me the powers.
To kick. I mean, it's been, it's the 7th. I mean, this next, 10 to 14 days are pretty freaking special to be in the woods. Unfortunately, it looks like most of us are going to have really warm weather. I think that mornings are going to be key to catching movement. Doesn't mean that you can't kill one midday, but I don't think it's going to be very high. I think, mornings and evenings, kind of like, pre-rut is going to be your key, and, probably water holes, or water in the vicinity is going to be
They are starting to turn on a little bit. The water holes are.
Yeah, very necessary in terms of what you're experiencing. So, yeah, just keep that in mind as you're looking for the next, even if you're listening to this Thanksgiving week, I mean, we're probably due for a pretty big cold front here. Thanksgiving week, a lot of gun seasons are open. A lot of gun seasons are about to open. Pennsylvania and Ohio, especially, are within the next week if you're listening to this. So yeah, I mean, shit's gonna get Western real quick.
Yeah.
And so just enjoy it. It's November.
It's funny when November comes around, like it feels late. It feels like we've got a fair amount of hunting under our belts.
Sure.
But it's like it's just November 7th. Like we're peaking right now.
November is awesome. I mean, it throws a lot of curveballs at you. The weather always can be a negative impact on stuff, but it's November, and I think that you stand just as good of a chance to kill a big buck in November as you do any other month. And I do think that if you're listening to this Thanksgiving week, Nick, then probably in the next week or so, man, that's where you hope you have food sources. because those does are going to be on them. Those bucks are going to start to look for those last does, as well as start to put a little bit of the feed bag on here. I think that's you may even have new bucks show up if you have food, because that's what they're going to be on.
Well, dude, and I sent you some pictures there, but I feel pretty good about the bean field that we planted.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a ton of food there.
Yes.
I'm actually pretty confident that
there's a lot of food
if they're still alive, like some of those bucks that I saw on the Ramsey and
would
stuff,
be right up in there.
Yeah, I think we'll end up pulling them.
Yep. Bed food.
Yeah.
At that point. So
definitely helps elongate the season in that sense. I mean, dude, a lot of people, the gig is up after November.
Most
basically.
of my farms historically have. It'll be interesting to see what Ohio does with a lot of treetops and browse down after this timber, as well as I've got some food plots. Kentucky, I've got a lot of food on my new farm. Really, I mean, I've seen some bucks. I've seen a couple of decent bucks, but nothing new.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've got some food in some places. My Pennsylvania one is going to start struggling here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unfortunate part about yesterday is like I'm about at peak here. In the next, but right before we leave for Kansas, like that's it. Yeah. It starts to go downhill. Gun season, I'm hoping that Carter will have some success. I know Emily will hunt gun too, but we'll take a couple does off still, but we're starting to be on the downgrade here. It's just because we don't have the food to hold them, and I'm in, huge mountain country.
We're gonna have an actual doe fest this year, I think, during one of the gun seasons.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to bring the kids up or whatever, but
sure.
That's mainly what it is. His dad's got kids from church that he's friends with their dads.
Sounds like a war zone out there, probably.
Well, we need to whack a lot of does. We really do. I mean, I just think that we
get the old cooler truck lined up.
The more time I spend on our property, it's just like, man, it's granted it's a large amount of acreage, but it's like so you can only take on so many projects at once. But it's like compared to like our Illinois farm and stuff, it's like, man, we really are struggling for cover mainly. Those burns are looking
great.
Awesome. I can't wait to see how those pan out in the next couple of years.
I think they'll be pretty clutch. So. Anyways, we hope you enjoyed this episode of HUNTR Podcast and enjoy November and Turkey Days coming up. And if you're listening to this, you probably already heard us live in Kansas, but that's where we'll be next.
Sounds good. Later.
Take me